Hey everyone, Anark here, and this is another Anark live stream. I think we've got this one started without hiccups. The only thing I don't know is whether the audio is synced up, so I'm about to find out. Looks good. All right. So, doesn't look like we got too many people in here yet. Gives me a few minutes in order to get the stream shared out. Those of you who are watching the VOD afterwards, I appreciate you. People are arriving. How's everybody doing today? All right, sharing the thing. Okay. Boop, boop. There we go. All right, putting it in all the places. The art to the right, my right or your right? The art to my right, over here, this is by No Bonzo, and I got this by backing the illustrated version of Kropotkin's Mutual Aid through PM Press. But this art over to the left on the wall is from the Zapatistas. It's like a poster illustrated in their style, and it's pretty cool. Jessica says, love to hear how your assemblies went at Tulsa. What kind of issues did folks discuss? They discussed all kinds of things. Let me see if I can actually like pull up, because we actually did like a little survey, during the thing. So let me see if I can find it. Damn, how did I have it stored? Yeah, I think I found it. Let's see. Numerous people said homelessness or unhoused people, food security, the housing crisis. So again, we have a war. That was one of them. Lack of labor consciousness. People are working a lot, but their needs aren't being met. Building dual power infrastructure, more environmental stuff. Lack of affordable housing security, lots of stuff about housing for sure. Working class unity, definitely saw a few of those. Wow, housing is just probably by far the most recurring one I'm seeing here. Poverty, housing availability, affordable housing. It's just like that one just keeps recurring here. Let's see, ICE presence and detainment. The environment. Yeah, definitely. The big ones are the environment, and housing and food security. Those are definitely the big ones. Is rent an issue? I mean, yeah, I suppose anywhere rent is an issue, you know, people are having to make their bills. However, I just want to note that, like, by comparison to a lot of other places, Tulsa is better off insofar as the cost of our living. So when you move to Tulsa, you're more likely to be able to afford your rent, even though we have a very low wage here, average wage here in Tulsa, but our rent is, when compared to the rest of the country, lower than the average. Miss Elaine Dumas says, what did you think about the dissolution of the PKK? As a Kurdish anarchist, it really got to me. You know, the truth is that I've seen enough of these sorts of events happen that I am really not sure what to make of it. I would have to do like a deeper, more detailed research to know what it really entails. Because as I understand it, there are still many of the communes in place. The communes are still largely in place. The women's units are still in place. The YPG is still kind of still a thing, and so I'd have to like look into the details of what it actually even means for the PKK to dissolve, because the PKK doesn't like control the Rojava or Northeast Syria. So yeah, I mean, it's discouraging, of course, to hear that there's any backsliding taking place, but it should just be, people should just be reminded that the PKK is not Rojava. But in Turkey, the PKK is very, very important, even though, as I understand, it is actually outlawed. Jackalope says, yo, double dipping with a Patreon vid and a live stream. I mean, yeah, I guess so. I was actually I'd scheduled to have the video that I just released there on the early release on the Patreon. I had scheduled for it to release today, but then I remembered today is a live stream, so it's not a good idea for me to release it on the same day as a live stream. But yeah, I just want to tell everybody, usually I don't do early releases of my videos because I'm just working on them up until the last minute, and like they're usually not in a good enough version to release until they're ready to release. However, I am uploading a mostly finished draft of a video called The House is on Fire, which I've been working on for some time now. And this video, I put the amount of effort I would put into like a video essay, but into an introductory video. So like y'all can see how nice my filming setup is now. Yeah, I used that filming setup in order to make a really nice video that was kind of an introduction or a radicalization primer, you might say. It's not trying to like teach people theory. It's trying to get people to even like accept that there is a problem. I used the sort of like public health messaging framework that is used to talk to people about addiction and addiction recovery. And I took that model and I applied it to radicalization. And so it's meant to get to people before they've even begun contemplating that there is a problem and getting them to connect with the fact that there is a problem, and then taking that realization that there is a problem and moving them toward what the actual solutions to the problem are. And in that sense, it's basically like in the style of an old pamphlet that would have been handed out to radicalize people back in the day when we used to hand out pamphlets as the main way of radicalizing people. But it's a YouTube video and it will be turned into a zine afterwards. I hope to, if I can, maybe have the zine version ready to go by the time it releases on May 1st. If you'd like to see the video early, however, you should click that Patreon link that is in the chat there. Go over to my Patreon, become a patron for any amount, and you'll get access to the video. Or if you just want access to the video and you don't want to become a patron, you can just pay $20 and get access to the video. Or if you really don't care that much, you can just wait until it's released on May 1st. However, you should go over and become a patron for any amount. The economy is not looking good, and I am really just on the border of subsistence from the channel. You know, there was a long period of time where on the channel, like every video, I would say, you know, I'm almost able to just support myself on the channel. I'm so close to being able to do the videos full time and all of that. And I barely got there. And then Trump got elected and the economy got wrecked, and my patrons have just been flat ever since, basically. My growth has been very, very slow on the channel. So just understand that this is like a time for me when I definitely do need my viewers to like step up and help me out, because I am now back to having to work, you know, a second job in order to make ends meet. I can no longer like pay my bills and pay for groceries and gas and everything in the conditions as they are. So if y'all want to help me continue working on the channel as much as I can, please become a patron for any amount, because that is what allows me to continue making YouTube videos. And I have so many different things in the works, but it is very hard to find time to do all of them when now I have to work odd jobs on the side in order to make ends meet. So anyway. Eli says, hey, Anark, Eli here. I live in a mildly red city in Maine, a purple-leaning blue state. What tips do you have for organizing? My tips for organizing is to just treat people like people, because, you know, I'm here in a red state. Do not approach people with the assumption that you're just going to talk to a bunch of Republicans. People everywhere are just people, and you're going to find people that are exceptions to the rule all the time. Approach everybody as if they could be anybody. And if you do that, then you will approach people with charity and patience and kindness, which is really what allows us to pull people into our coalitions. So I'd say the main thing I would note is don't be afraid of your neighbor. Be very, very open to speaking with anybody about anything, or about any political topic, I should say, and be patient with people. Don't get angry at people when they're behind the curve, especially when you're in a place that has a more red culture. You should expect that people are going to be behind the curve on things. We need to be educators. We need to look at ourselves as being emissaries of our ideology, and not as people that are trying to judge or condemn the average person that we speak with. That's what I think. Perpacino says, what are some good books, Randy, regarding social ecology? And Jessica actually gave a pretty good answer, and that is Practicing Social Ecology by Eleanor Finley. In fact, Eleanor Finley just came and visited us here in Tulsa and spoke with Camila Vergara for free, the Forum for Real Economic Emancipation. And you can actually go watch that talk on the YouTube channel for free, which is, once again, the Forum for Real Economic Emancipation. And, you know, Eleanor talks about her experiences with social ecology and Rojava and all kinds of other things. And you should go watch it. But also, that book is really excellent. It's very praxis oriented, I was surprised to find. Yeah, so highly recommend Practicing Social Ecology. Knowledge and Defense says, do you know what often happens to mutual aid networks during revolutions? Can they expand alongside workers' councils into a planned economy that minimizes markets as much and as fast as possible? So when I'm thinking of the answer to that question, I don't know if y'all can hear the loud leaf blower outside. Tell me if it's too loud. But you know, when I look at like what happened with the Spanish Revolution in Catalonia, what I read about was how they turned like enormous storehouses into repositories for goods, and they would just directly distribute those goods as needed. And as I understand it, this was mostly done with foodstuffs because their agriculture was largely collectivized and decommodified. So I think that those networks, those logistics, and the people that are doing them, those people are probably going to have a lot of skills that they can offer to the movement when there is a transition into larger storage and distribution of goods. Okay, so just looking back through all of the chats that I might have missed here. What do y'all think about the new camera? It looks pretty, huh? It looks pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, we got it all set up over here. Only problem is I don't have it set up where the camera gets continuous power. Instead, I actually do have to shift out the batteries every once in a while. So it kind of makes it to where I can't go as long as I might like on the live stream. Also, I'm getting used to my camera being over here instead of like, usually it's like above my monitor, but like now it's like over to the side, and I'm like not quite used to looking over to that angle. Isma Volt says, is it me or is Anark wider? Are you trying to say that I gained weight? What are you trying to say right now? I am deeply offended. Or I think you're saying that the widescreen, more widescreen, right? Broad-shouldered. Yeah. I'm a large person. I don't know if y'all pick that up from my videos or the live streams, but I am enormous. I am 6'3" and very broad-shouldered. I'm a very large person. It probably has something to do with the focal length too. Knowledge and Defense says, have you ever encountered or interacted with Italian Leninists, as Perpicino mentioned? No, I missed that. Oh, so here's something funny. Recently, this is what Perpicino originally said. So here's something funny. Recently, I came across an Italian leftcom, or Bordigist in layman's terms, who insisted that anarcho-communism and Marxism are basically the same, but with different words. I think that's true of a lot of sects or some sects of Marxism, specifically like some of the leftcom sects. For example, I think that council communism is basically anarcho-communism, more specifically anarcho-syndicalism, very minor differences. And those divergences that are seen between anarcho-syndicalism and council communism are really not even so large that they would be outside of the realm of anarchist political philosophy. So like council communism is very, very close to anarcho-syndicalism. The deviation from anarcho-syndicalism that council communism has is not greater than you might see between anarcho-syndicalism and other anarchist tendencies. So council communism, as far as I'm concerned, is a simpatico sort of political tendency to anarchist organizing. It's what I would put in the broader category of libertarian socialism. So I agree with that in that context, but leftcom or left communism is a kind of a broad category containing numerous sorts of ideologies that I do and do not really agree with, or I do and do not think that there would be good cooperation with anarchists on. So I don't know. I think that statement that Marxism and anarcho-communism are basically the same is a little bit too broad. But I do think that there are forms of Marxism that are very similar to anarchism. And I do think that Marx, the historical figure Marx himself, was closer to a modern anarchist in his political views than he is to any modern like Leninist or Stalinist or anything like that. I think that they have diverged very, very far away from Marx. And this is even keeping in mind that Marx did have numerous sort of, statist or maybe authoritarian leanings, especially early in his life. But even by that measure, even with that recognition in mind, it is nothing compared to the extent of authoritarianism and state worship seen in like Leninism and Stalinism and even most forms of Maoism. So, I think that's like a really complicated thing to just say broadly. It's certainly very reductive to just say they're the same thing. I don't think that's true at all. Scobbed says, hi, Anark. I've been organizing with Maoists for about a year, and I find the ideology convincing. I don't know how to feel about this. Well, I mean, I guess it kind of depends on what version of Maoism that you've been delivered. One of the key things about how that Maoism is pitched to people is that they are taught to try to essentially listen to what people are saying they want, and then to convince people that that is exactly what they want. Let's see here. I'm trying to find, there is this piece that I read that was about the anarchist movement in China, and it has like a piece at the end that basically talks about this concept. So I was going to read through that real quick. Okay, the Maoist method of recruiting uses a similar tactic. They were talking about re-education camps earlier in the piece. I'll link this for everybody, so if you want to read along, you can. Give me just a sec. I was struck by this because this fits my own experience so much with Maoists. The Maoist method of recruiting uses a similar tactic. The person who the Maoist is trying to recruit is asked to recite their beliefs and then persuaded that working toward the objectives of the Maoist Communist Party will fulfill that person's beliefs and desires. The objective is to persuade you to do more and more until you're actually following the Maoist leaders at the expense of your original values, desires, work projects, etc. Once they get you into the movement, they begin the process of trying to re-educate you by challenging your beliefs until you think like they do. It's a kind of brainwashing similar to that used by some religious cults. And so, yeah, this is something that they do often. This is a big part of the way that they sort of like deceive people into becoming Maoists a lot of the time, is they try to convince them that they already agree with Maoism and that, you know, they should just become Maoists. And they don't really confront the disagreements that they have until they've already pulled the people very close in. And then they do struggle sessions and they confront you about every minor disagreement that you have with the party line. So just understand that that's kind of part of the baseline persuasive tactics that Maoists use in order to pull people into their parties. That being said, I just want to say, with all that in mind, I've met plenty of Maoists that don't, in my mind, like fit the worst tendencies of Maoism. I think that Maoism, of all of these sort of Marxist revisions, all of those things that came in that whole lineage coming after Marxist-Leninism, I think that Maoism has the most radicals within its tendency who are devoted to actually empowering the proletariat and in constructing bottom-up power. And this is why you'll find that it sort of overlaps with the most acceptable or the most agreeable authoritarian leftists that you'll find. But I think when you really look into the content of a lot of what they're saying, you'll find that it still contains all of the seeds of the authoritarian mindset. The party is still allowed to be a very authoritarian structure in 99% of these Maoist tendencies. Prefiguration is sidelined. They still have the idea that they're basically just going to do guerrilla warfare. They're going to conquer the state or take over the state and then do state capitalism. In the meantime, they might be the sorts that are like, well, we have to organize among the people, but they're always trying to organize the people toward repetition of the Long March in China, essentially. And that's something to really look out for. So I'd be really careful of all of these tendencies. I think that it's a bad idea to organize with authoritarian leftists. There may be individual exceptions, and they are exceptions precisely because they don't have the values of authoritarian leftists. But if you were actually convinced by authoritarian arguments, that's a whole other matter, in which case I would say you should probably read a lot of critiques of those authoritarian arguments, because I really, after having heard all of their arguments, done an enormous amount of research into their projects, read a bunch of their theory, I'm just here to tell you that it isn't actually convincing. Like, if you actually understand the arguments they're making, they're not convincing arguments. Those arguments are convincing if you don't have a strong theoretical basic knowledge. So, if the first thing you read is State and Revolution, you're probably going to be convinced by it. But if what you did instead was read Marx, read Engels, read Bakunin, read Kropotkin, read a wide range of thinkers before coming across State and Revolution, it really shouldn't be very convincing. There are parts of it which are kind of libertarian socialist, so I can understand how maybe those would be convincing. But the overall arguments of Leninism and those sort of revisionist lines really aren't very convincing if you know the facts of how revolutions are made, and you can look at the examples of their practice in real life being put into action, and you compare it to their words. You really just see that these aren't very convincing arguments by and large. These are actually kind of deceptive arguments where they straw man their opponents, where they soft pedal the risk of their own abuses, where they glorify the position of the party within the context of the social revolution, if they even believe in social revolution. So, yeah, I don't know if you're actually convinced by the authoritarian arguments. I would recommend watching my 4-part series, The State is Counter-Revolutionary, or reading the version of it that's been uploaded to Anarchist Library, because in my view, having continued to talk with authoritarian leftists for years after having written it, I've never heard any of them provide a very convincing rebuttal to it. At best, they just do this kind of nitpicking about small details. Suleth says, sorry for the depressing question, but do you feel like the world is so fucked that unfucking it would require so much bloodshed it'd just bring us all down with it? Is it even possible anymore? Yeah, no, I never take that position. I think that I understand, I empathize with you feeling that way. Like, I get it. That makes sense given our conditions. We're in some really dark conditions, y'all. I'm not trying to downplay it at all. But I just want to be clear that the belief that nothing can be done leads to nothing being done. The belief that we're so fucked that there's no coming back from it makes certain that we will never come back from it. It is necessary that we conceptualize what success would look like if we are going to succeed. So like, if you're in prison and your goal is to get out of prison in short order, okay, you're not going to be thinking to yourself about, oh, here's all the reasons why I can't do it. You're going to think to yourself of those things as hurdles, right? Which is, I'm just using prison break as an example. There's any given thing that you could bring up, right? You're instead, like in the example of the prison break, you're going to be looking at the things that are in your way as hurdles that have to be overcome, as barriers that have to be superseded somehow. And that's the only way you're ever going to do a prison break. You're never going to do a prison break by convincing yourself that it's impossible to escape the prison. In the same way, like, say you want to become like a professional athlete or something. You're never going to become a professional athlete by convincing yourself you can't become a professional athlete. You instead have to at least like conceptualize to yourself, if I were to become a professional athlete, what is the series of steps I would have to take in order to succeed at that? And then you have to begin earnestly proceeding forth through those steps in such a way that you might actually achieve being an athlete. Revolution is no different. You have to like, in a deliberate sense, you have to conceptualize to yourself what it would look like to succeed. If you start with the assumption that it's impossible for us to do revolution, it's impossible for us to stop the wave of the enemy, then we will never stop the wave of the enemy. Instead, you have to earnestly inform yourself about what it would look like to change conditions. So this is why I do think it's important to read theory, and why I think this whole like wave of telling people you don't need to read theory, very bad idea. People should read theory. Maybe that's not the first thing they should start with, but we should be encouraging people to read theory, because theory gives structure to our understanding of the world. It helps us understand the content of social revolution and how we play a role in social revolution. And it takes us reading through the thoughts of many other people who have confronted this question, and for us to confront the history of the successes and failures of the movement in the past, for us to understand what it would look like for us to confront it. So I would say, watch my video Hope, watch my video Constructing the Revolution, watch or read A Modern Anarchism. All of these are pieces that are written to pull you out of the mindset that you're in right now, and to give you a structure of understanding that will help you proceed forward and to find your place in social revolution. Danny ADXZ says, tell us about your experience with Means TV. They've been like super gracious, and they've been very, I don't know, like accommodating and kind to me, and I've had no issues with Means TV. They made basically no demands. They just they're partners, like it is a workers' cooperative. So all of the workers in the cooperative are kind of collaborating together for the whole thing to move forward as necessary. And so, yeah, no, I guess my experience has been positive. I don't have anything negative to say about Means TV. So yeah, I mean, and going further, Means TV is the reason why I have this fancy camera right now. Means TV is the reason why my production quality has gone up, because I came to them and I was like, hey, I'd like to improve my production quality. Would y'all be willing to, fund an expansion of my camera equipment and all of that for the channel? And they absolutely did so. They were happy to take the deal. And in response, I'm just going to make them 3 exclusive videos for Means TV. Those are going to be about Occupy, Stop Cop City, and Chaz Chop. And so those videos are all in production right now, and they'll probably be released throughout the year, but if I had to guess, a little bit later in the year. And yeah, no, that's been enormously helpful for the channel. And it's also going to be helpful for Cooperation Tulsa, because I'll probably end up using these cameras for Cooperation Tulsa as well. I've just had positive experiences with Means TV at the moment. Scoped says, how do you feel about the more campist arguments, or should I say materialist? Campism is not materialism. That's not true. Where the whole deal is challenging Western hegemony, even if conditions aren't perfect. For example, Iran, Hamas, geopolitics. Yeah, no, that's called opportunism. That's not materialism. In fact, this word materialism is just a thought terminating cliche. They don't know what the word materialism means. They just use the word materialism to steal the valor of the word materialism. Materialism, at its base, just is a philosophical position that the universe is made of material stuff. That's materialism. Materialism in the context of political theory comes from them essentially taking Hegel's dialectic method, but flipping it on its head, as they said. So Hegel's method believed that there was like this transcendent spirit that was driving political events forward and driving the actions of nations and all of this stuff. And what they did is they said, no, we agree with your dialectic process, but we don't believe that this is like metaphysically true. Your idea about like spirits driving things, we don't agree with that. We think that the material world is what drives things, that everything is based in materiality, and that there is a dialectic process between material conditions, which is to say the way the economy is set up, the conditions of the workers and what they do or do not have access to. These are the things which determine the evolution of society, politics, economics, etc. So in a big way, this is just a very uncontroversial statement. Now it gets expanded out into also a statement, a sort of economic reductionist statement, that all of history is purely the interaction of economic classes, and that there is no complication, that essentially it's an erasure of power as a mode of analysis, and instead looking only at the economic conditions of any society as a way to determine how it functions. Okay, cool. So that's kind of like the summary. Now let's look at campism. Campism really has nothing to do with what I just said. Campism is just taking sides in inter-imperialist war. So what's happening in campism is they're saying, okay, so there's a big guy on the block, capitalist, this capitalist superpower, the United States, and it imperializes the world. And this imperialization prevents the development of socialist projects in a bunch of different places. So, agreed. That seems accurate. And then what they say is as long as an imperial superpower exists, it is impossible to develop to the next stage of revolution. That really is nonsense. We can see how the capitalists carried out their revolution, and it's not as if imperialism didn't exist in the age of feudalism. It's not like in the 1500s there was no imperial expansion, that there were no empires, that there weren't wars of conquest for resources. That didn't matter for the capitalists. The capitalists prefigured capitalist property relations within the society which existed. They didn't demand that the conditions were like this idyllic, perfect condition before they could finally start developing the conditions of a new society. If anything, I think that this is anti-materialist, because they don't understand if they believe that everything is dialectic, everything is in process, everything is like, all of these different elements interacting in order to move forward developmentally to create the future, then they should understand that there is never going to be perfect conditions in which you will have a perfectly fertile ground without toxins, without pests, in order to plant the new world. You have to plant the new world in the soil that exists. You can't like clear everything and make it absolutely perfect and then try to build the future world. So the real reason why campism arose is not because it comes from some grand materialist analysis. It's because their method failed. So the authoritarian leftists tried to convince everybody that this vanguardist method of taking over the state was absolutely necessary. Then they did it, and it didn't produce socialism. It produced state capitalism, and then that state capitalism slowly liberalized and devolved into regular schmegular capitalism. So then what they had to do was they had to give themselves a reason why that their grand method, which was so smart and which they had betrayed all of the revolutions that they were part of in order to do their method, because they thought they were these high-minded utilitarians, they had to give themselves some reasoning as to why that their method failed. And so they created a new boogeyman. They essentially abandoned the class struggle. They abandoned the struggle between the bourgeois and the proletariat, and they chose a new primary contradiction. And that new primary contradiction was imperialism, because imperialism was the boogeyman they used in order to excuse why they failed. Now, don't get me wrong. Was it the case that imperial expansion and that empires trying to expand and destroy their projects was a reason why their projects were destroyed? Absolutely. Yes. But that's like saying that because the Pinkertons wrecked a bunch of unions, because on the Battle of Blair Mountain the workers were killed by guns, that before we can have union activity we have to abolish all private police and abolish all guns. This is absurd. It's a cope. And unfortunately, this cope has become so big, so elaborate, so expansive in authoritarian leftist spaces that they've essentially completely abandoned the struggle between the bourgeois and the proletariat. They don't even care about the liberation of the masses from the control by the capitalist class. They don't care about creating a society of decommodification, a society where the workers have control. That is just not even on their list anymore. They've now just become, honestly, geopolitical opportunists. They now only care about realpolitik. And realpolitik is this sort of fascistic and liberal geopolitical analysis where all that matters is the outcomes of states at the geopolitical scale. This has nothing to do with revolutionary values. This is bare opportunism, which is attempting to shift the original goal, the revolutionary goal of the left, the defining revolutionary goal of the left, which is worker emancipation, worker control over the means of production. They've abandoned that. And now all they really care about is siding with different states. And so then what happens? What happens is they side with different empires over the worst empire. They do sort of this lesser of two evilism. The same logic about the lesser of two evils with voting as respect to Republicans and Democrats, and the same reason why many authoritarian leftists were willing to come out in favor of voting for Hillary Clinton. Was because this lesser of two evils liberal thinking about how you go about getting change in society, it has completely come to dominate the authoritarian left. So, when I'm using this word opportunist, opportunism is essentially the abandonment of the base revolutionary values of the movement in order to put together coalitions and to build power opportunistically with whoever you can and whatever coalition you can. And this is what literally led to fascism. This is what Mussolini did. Mussolini used to be part of the Socialist Party there in Italy. He was considered a very devoted socialist. However, Mussolini recognized that the socialism that they were advocating wasn't working. And in order to sort of construct what he thought was necessary, he was opportunistically then began to instead try to develop rhetoric around the nation, around the state, around the people as some homogenous entity, around culture, around machismo, patriarchal and hierarchical values. His idea was just the state of things has to change under any conditions. And I'm going to do whatever's necessary to make sure that the state of things changes under any conditions. And so, as an opportunist does, he sought out whatever worked without any recognition of the base theory and revolutionary values that the left is historically, the left historically originates in. So if you want to know what the outcome of the sort of like campist, opportunism, well, fascism is the end outcome of authoritarian leftists pivoting towards bare opportunism. The more opportunist that authoritarian leftists become, the more they will find themselves essentially taking on the stances of fascists. We can see this, for example, in the ACP and with Bad Empanada. Both of these people are essentially now reactionaries. There's some kind of maybe like a Nosbol or Strasserites. This is because this sort of opportunistic campist thinking leads one to becoming a reactionary, because what you're trying to do is you're not saying, how do I change conditions? How do I change the content of public consciousness? Instead, what you're saying is, I'm just going to stoop to the lowest common denominator, and I'm going to organize people together based on just whatever they already kind of organically want. And then I'm going to try to turn that into a political coalition that will change the conditions of things under any circumstance. And that eventually will just lead you to fascism. And we can see that throughout the authoritarian left, and even many sectors of the authoritarian left, which I wouldn't regularly say are Strasserites or Nosbols, are trending towards it day by day. And you can especially see it on places like Twitter. Hey, don't mess with my lighting. The cat is fucking with my lighting over there. Okay, there we go. Don't do that, you silly goof. The cat, I don't know what the cat wants. They have food. Stop it. Stop fucking with that. The cat doesn't like that the light is in the way of his walking path. Yeah, Kristen Supine says, let us never, ever forget why Marxist-Leninism was birthed. It was literally synthesized to prop up and defend the counter-revolutions and betrayals of the working class liberation by the USSR. That is precisely correct. That is where Leninism and Marxist-Leninism, Stalinism, all of these sorts of deviations that claim themselves to be Marxist, that's where they come from. They come from a defense of counter-revolutionary, reactionary tendencies among the state capitalist ruling class, especially among the Bolsheviks in the Russian Revolution. Yeah, I mean, it's essentially counter-revolutionary ideology is what it is. It is an ideology whose functional purpose, right? Remember, the purpose of a system is what it does. Its functional purpose is to carry out counter-revolution at the juncture where revolution is possible. And so it is actually one of the most dangerous things that you could have spread in a movement. The bigger that authoritarian leftism gets, the more that if your movement is successful, your movement is going to be counter-revolutionized by the authoritarian leftists. They're going to barge in, take control, they're going to authoritarianize everything, and in that process, they're going to destroy the revolutionary gains that you had to begin with. And then a few decades later, you'll be back at capitalism because they have not fundamentally escaped the logics of capitalism in doing so. So yeah, they lack means ends unity. Therefore, they are an active impediment to revolutionary activity. Knowledge and Defense says, like Mussolini, they're also grifters, so they don't really care about any of this. Yeah, Bad Empanada is the perfect example. He doesn't give a shit about any of this. He's a total grifter. Knowledge and Defense says, but what do you think about some anarchists siding with Ukraine? Do you consider Ukraine to be imperialist due to arguably being a semi-proxy? Personally, I'm not sure I understand this enough. Well, I don't think we should be siding with the state of Ukraine. When I say, like, you know, siding with, I'm not saying that, like, you know, we should side with the Ukrainian people in resisting imperial incursion. Sorry, I have to replace the battery. There we go. There we go. Fixed. Nah, the cat didn't kill the camera. It just ran out of juice. I haven't got a permanent battery source for this camera, so instead I have to actually replace the battery during live streams, which is like a huge impediment to me doing live streams. I just have not had the money to buy it. I'm so broke, y'all. Incredibly broke. But no, yeah, as far as like Ukraine and all of that. So no, we should not support the Ukrainian state, but we should regard that they are defending themselves from Russia. There's no justification that you can just attack a state because they have relations with the United States and because they are like an imperial outpost. There's a lot of imperial outposts, and those you cannot just justify that the other side gets to do imperialism in response and claim land and conquer all of these regions and do widespread destruction, which harms the civilians and doesn't, of course, give any power to the Ukrainian people as it takes over their land, and that this is somehow an act of anti-imperialism. No, this is an act of inter-imperialism. I think this is what the authoritarian left doesn't seem to understand. It's not just like one side is imperialist and everybody else is not. The history of humanity, the history of geopolitics has been competing empires. There's rarely a single hegemon that lasts for very long. If the United States could be said to have a hegemonic imperial position, that time is gone. That time is gone. Like, you wanted multipolarity? We're in the time of multipolarity. And now that you have multipolarity, you don't get to claim that there's a single imperial hegemon anymore. Now there are numerous competing imperial hegemons. And so when you side with one imperial, aspiring hegemon against one other aspiring hegemon, you're not being radical. You are being an opportunist. You have abandoned the revolutionary struggle. And this used to be a damning thing for people to do, take sides in these wars between the bourgeois, right? The bourgeois of the Russia and the bourgeois of the United States and the bourgeois of Ukraine and all of that. It used to be that we considered it damning when people took sides between these imperialist aspirants. But now, apparently in the modern day, this has just become normal. It's bizarre because I even still see people trying to condemn Kropotkin for having took sides in World War I, yet campism is extremely common these days. Campism is like the standard. So like people, I don't understand what people, you can't be a campist and condemn Kropotkin for taking sides in World War I. That's bizarre. That's bizarre. If you're a campist, you are fundamentally just using lesser of two evils ideology. You do not get to have a high horse on which to condemn other people. You are beneath the social revolution in dignity and in a respectability. People should not be listening to you for advice. You're essentially just a glorified liberal at that point. So like, you just are a liberal who took sides with a different bourgeois nation. And that, to me, I don't know. I just don't understand. Why are we giving these people respect? Why are we acting like they are like the standard in the movement? There's like, I see all over the place on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter, these people are not getting pushback. These people are not getting pushback. The revolutionary values of the left, I'm seeing them increasingly be lost in all of our spaces. I don't see people appealing at all to the basic theoretical values of the left. What I see instead is this sort of bare, campist opportunism, which I see as an abandonment of the left and instead a movement to the right. And I just want to note that if you're very authoritarian and you move towards the right, you're becoming fascist. You're not becoming a principled revolutionary leftist. The focus on the national struggle over the struggle of the bourgeois and the proletariat between the people and the rulers, that has no revolutionary value. That is instead capitulating to the geopolitical inter-imperialist rivalries of what came before the leftist movement. You know, there was a time when people used to argue over who was worse, France or Great Britain, in a time when both of them were very powerful and back and forth trading power, acting as imperial, aspirants for long periods of times, decades, even centuries between one another, feuding back and forth, taking sides between Britain and France. That wouldn't have made you a revolutionary. What made you a revolutionary was recognizing that the structure of both Britain and France as monarchies must be abolished and that we have to transcend the structure of the monarchy. That would have been a revolutionary conception. It is not a revolutionary conception, and nor was it at the time a revolutionary conception, to have chosen sides between those competing imperialist blocs. Inter-imperialist wars are only our concern insofar as that we are going to be forced to reckon with them, not insofar as that we should be actively and proactively taking part in them and taking sides in them. That has nothing to do with leftist revolutionary values. The only thing that we should regard is who the aggressor is and who the defender is. And we should recognize that the aggressor is doing more harm in the process than the person who's defending themselves. And that is a pretty universal understanding here. I think that siding with Russia is truly nonsense. Russia has no leftist values. Russia is fascist. Russia is a fascist nation. And then people will respond, well, Ukraine is a fascist nation. They're both fascist nations. That's why you shouldn't be taking sides. If you're taking sides between fascist nations, then you're siding with fascisms. Like with fascism, you're siding with one or another fascist nation. Yeah, this is nonsense. Campism is probably one of the quickest paths to becoming a fascist. I think that campism is the most active red-brown pipeline that exists right now. And it's been this way for a long time, actually. Let me just give y'all an article about this. I would really like for y'all to read this article, because this is not new, y'all. They've been trying to do this for a while. It's just that beforehand, their weird little cults were kind of repulsive to most people. But somehow, now that the internet exists, all of these weird, like red-brown pipelines are becoming very active, because for some reason, people on the internet are way more willing to accept violations of their own revolutionary values. I don't understand it. I think it has something to do, authoritarian leftists are doing harassment campaigns. Okay. So one thing I noticed was, if all you do is state anarchist positions, you'll get like 50 trolls immediately show up and start talking shit. And they'll just say all kinds of random nonsense things that contradict each other, things that don't even make sense, things that aren't on topic at all. And this, I think, is how they are trying to suppress the overall conversation on the left. And I think it is a big part of how they are pushing campism. They're trying to essentially humiliate or terrorize anybody who has actual revolutionary values. You need to understand that the campist portion of our left echo chambers, which I don't know, many of them I think aren't leftists anymore. These are not allies. These people are here as saboteurs. Campism is a sabotaging prospect for the left. It is the left becoming not the left anymore. It is the left pivoting towards fascism. And that is to say, the usage of leftist aesthetics, but instead in order to recatalyze hierarchical power structures in society when under crisis. And that is precisely what these campists are doing for foreign nations. Okay? So that's what I think of campism. Campism is possibly one of the most dangerous things that is taking place right now. Got a $2 or a €2.50 donation from Seedthe. They said, hello. Hey there. How you doing? I appreciate you donating and definitely need it. I'm poor as hell. Poor as you come right now. But yeah. Knowledge in Defense says, but considering Ukraine is also controlled by capitalists, then how do we avoid defending that structure by default? Can revolutionary defeatism apply here like in World War I? Yes, it applies in all circumstances. You should want your bourgeois nation to fail, and you should be trying to catalyze the people's power structures, the proletarian power structures, which are going to do the work of then fighting off the incursion themselves, taking the conditions of the conflict and turning them into revolutionary conditions. This is what the classical position was. This is what everybody used to say back in the day. And this is what actually did work as well. Okay. China, the Maoist revolution took place amidst many incursions, many imperial incursions. It took place during the time that the imperial incursions were happening. And that was beneficial to the rise of their movement. The same thing in Russia. There were, like, right after they started, numerous imperial incursions. And that was precisely the conditions under which the Black Army in Ukraine rose up. So this idea that we are supposed to be defending the states themselves, this is just a completely aberrant sort of revisionist, opportunist tendency, which has risen on the left, which should be utterly rejected. And these people should be chastised and pushed out of the movement. We should be recognizing them as a sort of a tendency which is a threat to the overall success of the leftist project, which is the emancipation of the workers from domination by the bourgeois, the elimination of the alienation of workers from the control over means of production, and then in the anarchist program, the alienation of the workers from control over all power structures, and the creation of horizontal power structures which empower the people and not a small group of rulers saying that they rule in the stead of the people. This should be our primary revolutionary program, not all of this nonsense where we're over here just putting flags for foreign nations which are exploiting their own people in our hashtags and in our descriptions. This is nonsensical. You should never be trying to defend a capitalist state. And right now, every state on earth is capitalist because a state can be nothing but capitalist or fascist in the modern day. And in the past, it could be monarchist, which could be said to be a form of pre-capitalist fascism. So, yeah, no, the state is a tool of domination and counter-revolution. That's the only thing it can be. It has no conceivable other possibility. There is the concept of a proletarian state or a people state doesn't exist. That's not real. That's a fantasy. So the idea that people would be out here standing for the states of other nations makes them counter-revolutionary, straight up. Mr. Poss donated $5 and said, do you think Machiavelli is a good read into how the pursuit of power in hierarchical systems is not virtuous and rewards bad actors? Absolutely. Yes. I mean, that's a good reason to read Machiavelli. If what you want to take away from it is the ethos of hierarchical power, it's an excellent primer on that. Absolutely. Platonic Exorcism says, when you say revisionism, what is being revised? I fear it stabilizes Marx as a theological source of truth when he was just one notable but flawed critic in a long line of left theorists. I don't mean revision of Marx. Marx was just one guy. I mean revision in the sense that they're using the word revisionism in order to refer to revision of those original ideas of Marx. I'm using it here to refer to the revision of the original leftist, the ideas of the leftist milieu and the ideas that were considered like the baseline of a social revolutionary. And those are what have been lost. Those are what I'm saying have been revised. And at this point, if one has strayed very far from those ideas, they are now veering into a different political theoretic camp. It's not to say that those ideas don't have validity in their own structure, in their own understanding. It's just to say that they now have, if you move too far away, you have diverged from the social revolutionary values of the left. And you have now begun to capitulate to values of the right wing and values of authoritarianism, which only prop up and reproduce capitalism, the state, patriarchy, white supremacy, transphobia, environmental destruction, the list goes on. And so that's what I'm saying. I'm not talking about Marx as being the only person here. I'm not a Marxist in the sense that I don't take Marx to be my only like bookmark or my only benchmark. It's instead just to say that this is a revision of leftist values and so has come to divert or diverge from those values foundationally. See, John Lee is a perfect example. John Lee, here's a sort of reactionary perspective. John Lee is a vote blue no matter who geopolitical thinker. You know, this is vote by not being a campist against the U.S. You are inadvertently helping the U.S. It doesn't matter what you say. Go fuck yourself. Yeah, see, this is silly and childish because the ideology of campism is childish. It is just childish. It's not a good understanding of how power works. Just like vote blue no matter who is a very immature and undeveloped sort of understanding of how electoral politics works. This campist ideology undermines the actual revolutionary values that would allow us to succeed in abolishing imperial powers to begin with. Trying to become an imperial power does not undermine imperialism. And this kind of silly thinking that if you are not siding with the people who are against the U.S., then you're for the U.S. This is precisely what fascists want to think. They are essentially, this is the fascist mentality, but for foreign nations. And it has no value in the left. In fact, this is an active pipeline into fascism. Yeah, American diabolism is a plague in leftist thought. Yeah, like America's uniquely, supernaturally the bad guy. It's like, no, America is probably the worst nation on earth, and I mean to say that in the sense that it causes the most damage on earth, but that's not because it has like some transcendent spirit of evilness. The United States is a nation with particular material power structures which exist, and those power structures perpetuate particular conditions. The goal is not to just support anybody who's against the United States, because that's not the big picture. The big picture is the emancipation of the masses, the liberation of the people, okay? And if your mind is only focused on campus geopolitics, you aren't really a leftist anymore. You're just rooting for one imperial power over the other. And there's really nothing of any value to that. So you should understand, I don't even really see you as a leftist if that's the perspective you take. You don't care about the conflict between the bourgeois and the proletariat. You don't care about worker empowerment. You don't care about worker control over the means of production. You don't care about the elimination of alienation between the worker and the economy. You're a liberal. Like you have a liberal or maybe a fascist's understanding of geopolitics, just vote blue no matter who, but China. Yeah, and that the other nations are the good guys. Wow. Extremely, extremely immature thinking. Yeah, somebody said socialism, or as Kristen Supine says, socialism and communism is not defined by being anti-US. Exactly. That is not what makes you socialist or communist. Socialism and communism literally have nothing to do with who you side with in geopolitics, other than to say that you should not be siding with any state. If you side with a capitalist state, you are not in line with your socialist or communist values. That is not a decision born out of leftist theoretic ideology. Knowledge and Defense says, I wonder how this framing works during World War II. Just be happy the Nazis were defeated. You don't have to support the USSR or the US to say that you want the Nazis to be defeated. You should be asking how you can provide material support to the destruction of the Nazis. You should be asking how you can empower the German people to overthrow the Nazi government. You should be asking how you can free people from the concentration camps. You should be asking then also how you can empower the people of the United States to overthrow their government, how you can empower the USSR the people of the USSR to overthrow their government. The ideology is honestly completely universalizing. It is a complete universal, and it will be throughout all of history and all of the future. You don't need to support the state. You need to oppose the aggressor, oppose the ones that are doing the damage. You need to be organizing the people against the imperial superpowers, not taking sides in inter-imperialist war. Chichica Stenongo. I actually linked an article just earlier. I'll link it again. Basically looking at the history of how campism is very directly associated with the Red-Brown pipeline, has been for some time, and even inspects why that campism is so directly associated with fascist figures like Alexander Dugin. So highly recommend you read that article. Yeah, I mean, I didn't see a bunch of questions. I was like, talking about what I wanted to talk about. And then, sometimes I'm not going to be able to see the questions. And oh, Ung Sun, there it is. Yo, Anark, did you see this guy, Socialism for All, did a video on you? I haven't seen it yet, and forgive me in case you addressed it. No, I've not watched it yet. I probably will do a response to that one, because I've had numerous people reach out to me and say that it was substantive, at least. Other people tell me that the Charlatix one was just like charlatan shit. Like, he didn't really say anything worth addressing. He was just kind of rambling incoherently. But numerous people have told me that I should watch and respond to the Socialism for All video. So I might do that. I might produce a response to that. But at the moment I have not watched it, and so I'm not working on a response as of yet, but that's something I've been, thinking about doing after I release this video. So that might be one of the next projects I work on. KD says, could you please share your definitions of capitalism, capitalist, and capital? How does your definition differ from others or the most common ones? I would say go watch my video. Let me see. What's it called? It's basically just like, talking about decoding leftist jargon. It's an older video, but I pretty much lay out my views on it there. Let me see if I can find the name. Well, one of them you could watch is What is Capitalism? That's one of them. Yeah, What is Capitalism? That's probably the right one to watch. Oh, then there's one, What does leftist jargon mean? That's also pretty old. That's back from 2023, but I think I probably still agree with the majority of what I said there. Oh, somebody said the vid for the Socialism for All video... The vid for Socialism for All's channel is so ass. Okay, so you're the first person that's told me that it like isn't worth my time. The other people have said they didn't find the arguments convincing, but they thought that the arguments were produced in good faith. And for me, that's a big part of whether I'm going to engage with somebody in a like substantive way is if I think they're engaging in good faith. If I don't think that they're engaging in good faith, if they're just looking for dunks and gotchas, they're not worth my time, and they're really not worth anybody's time. But if I feel like they're engaging in good faith, then I'll usually do a response or try to engage substantively with them. Mr. Miser says, yo, Big Dog Anark, what 5 books would you recommend for new people to anarchism, especially if they want to cover economics or how anarchism works? I actually have an entire reading list series. You can go find it on the channel. It's some of the earliest Anark abridged videos. Yeah, Anarchist Reading List, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4. Yeah, it's a 4-part series where I just give a bunch of what I think are really good books for people to read if they're trying to learn more about anarchism. And different kinds of anarchism as well. Some that are about economics, some that are about general primers and introductions. Culture Jamming said it is good faith from S4A. Okay, that's what I'm trying to see here. It's 5 parts. Yeah, it was a 5-part series. Okay. Yeah. Chichika Stenongo says, I fundamentally disagree with your definition of socialism as direct worker ownership of the means of production. Wage labor existed before capitalism in ancient Rome and medieval Europe. Yet capitalism is not something that happens on an individual scale. Capitalism is a system. Capitalism is a system of production. It is not just like when me or you, like when I like pay you a wage for something. That's not what capitalism is. Capitalism is a system. Capitalism isn't an action. So that's not really relevant. You know, elements of like fascism existed in monarchy. Like monarchy and fascism are very similar to one another. That doesn't mean that monarchy was precisely fascism. I don't find this isn't a very convincing rebuttal in my opinion. Musuda Trent, talking about the Socialism for All video, says, I agree that it was engaging in good faith, but the arguments were bad. That is pretty much what I was told. Numerous people told me that all of the arguments are addressed in my series, The State is Counter-Revolutionary. But it's an opportunity for me to refresh people on those arguments, so I probably will watch it, take notes, do a response. Timmy Wallace says, loving the new setup. So colorful. Well, I'm glad you think so. Went to a lot of effort to get this all set up properly. This new background, I had to move my entire room around. Yeah, I did not move to a different house. I've just changed the orientation of my setup. Zenith Nightshade says, do you want to comment on why it's so common that influencers often have Discord servers run by fascist-like minions? Thoughts on groupthink and saviorism and the liberation paradox as it relates to you and similar influencers and their fans taking on leadership roles? I'm not familiar with that. I'm not familiar with this phenomena of influencers having Discord servers run by fascist-like minions. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that's something that happens. I just haven't seen it. Not familiar with it. Zenagrala says, wage labor as we know it today is very different from one might call wage labor prior to capitalism as such. Agreed. Agreed 100%. Spider-Man says, you claim to not be a deontologist, but your view of the state is very deontological and moralistic, and also anti-authoritarianism is abstract. It's not a concrete thing. This tells me that you haven't actually engaged with my work. What you have is a series of thought-terminating cliches. So you probably heard somebody say that. You heard somebody claim this, like that I'm a deontologist about the state or that I'm a moralist about the state. But you didn't actually engage with anything that I said about it. You didn't read anything I said. You didn't watch any of my videos on the topic because of the anarchist thinkers who are writing things today and creating things today. I'm probably one of the most systems-oriented writers that you're going to find. I really do not talk almost at all about morals, ethics, right and wrong. I really only talk about conditions. I talk about structures. I talk about power. My underlying analysis is based on power as an atom for analysis. Kind of like how we have particles as the atom in physics for particle physics. I use power as the atom for my analysis. Power contains no inherent moral value or has no inherent moral dimension. Morals arise far after powers. Powers are something that arise out of the material conditions of people and the interaction of people and structures. So you saying this is a demonstration you don't engage with my work. And so this is what I mean by people making bad faith arguments. This is if you want me to respect your position, if you want me to take seriously your critique, you need to take the time to actually go consume my material and to understand what it is that I'm saying, and then maybe to understand what those words moralistic mean or deontologist means. Even down to the degree where authoritarianism, I define it as a precise theoretical construct in my work, and I relate the exact definition of authoritarianism to systems science. I literally use complex systems analysis and relate complex systems analysis to the meaning of the word authoritarianism and use it as a metric for understanding how power is distributed in systems. There's nothing deontological or moralistic about that. You need to read more. Oh, I see, Zenith. You're upset because you had a bad interaction in the server. Gotcha. Anyway, an influencer that doesn't talk about ethics. I don't talk about ethics because the goals at hand are really about the distribution of power. Like, ethics are something that arise in our preferences. They arise out of our natural conditions. So like they come from the things that we and other things need in the world. They come from what we are, our biological conditions. They come from our embeddedness in the environment and our relation to the environment. But that is something that, you have to work into your power analysis in understanding what your goals are. Ethics come into they come into the analysis when understanding like what it is that you're endeavoring towards and why. But ethics are not my primary topic of conversation because I don't know if you know this, maybe you haven't studied a lot of ethics, but ethics is a very, very difficult quagmire of a philosophical school. I remember when I got into philosophy, I felt as if every other category of philosophy, epistemology, ontology, logic, I quickly came to a conclusion that I was like, I'm very confident of this conclusion. And I found that after taking that position, I was very quickly able to address all arguments and take on all comers. Ethics, on the other hand, is very, very challenging. It is very, very difficult. And so if I'm going to write a piece on ethics, this is going to be a very, very involved piece. This is not going to be something that's offhand. This is certainly not some kind of manifesto I'm going to lay out to you on a live stream. I try to be very rigorous in my thought. So that's why I'm not talking about ethics. On this channel, we're talking about political theory largely. I have been breaching into philosophy, so it may be something that I talk about at a later date. But I think that you right now are really just upset that you had a bad interaction on the server. And I think that you should probably take a deep breath and step away. Yeah, Zenith, what you're doing right now, this is why people didn't want you on the Discord. This sort of behavior you're engaging in, this is why people didn't want you around. You're being very toxic. So you need to kind of probably inspect your own behavior and introspect about why you're talking about things that people widely already accept, but they pushed back against you particularly. And that's because of the way you approach disagreement. It's very unhealthy, and it points to a deep sense of insecurity that you need to deal with. Argo the Knot says, as an engineer, the systems thinking was what drew my interest to this channel. The need to be able to build systems that are robust and adaptable to emerging conditions. Yes, that is my primary fixation is upon building a broader systemic theoretic structure for understanding power in a universalizing sense, and for understanding, therefore, how power structures arise, how they perpetuate, and how they maintain themselves in a difficult world that has many sort of pressures and conditions which might push back against the creation of those power structures. So I'm essentially taking systems theory and I'm applying it to revolutionary prefiguration in order to understand what it looks like to prefigure something successfully in line with complex systems analysis. Zuko says, I don't know if it was addressed, but how to tackle environmental sustainability. Regulations were needed yesterday. Only state powers can enforce them now. No chance alternate social structures be created in time. That's the only solution. That might seem unfortunate, but the only solution is to create alternative power structures because the state's not going to enforce them. Everywhere on Earth, states are destroying the environment. And that's because the thing that's destroying the environment is not that the state doesn't have XYZ regulations. The thing that's destroying the environment is that the state and all of these, like capitalism and all these capitalist firms, are structured hierarchically. Hierarchical power structures are fundamentally reductive of complexity. Okay, so just understand that, in a game of telephone, the original message gets distorted and distorted and distorted. And by the time it gets back around to the original person, there's nothing left of it, right? Well, the same thing happens in power structures. The more junctures that something has to be passed through, the more lossiness gets brought into the signal. So that is something that takes place in all power structures. However, in a hierarchical power structure, the signal is also being passed through a smaller and smaller bottleneck. So when you take information, a signal, and you push it through a small bottleneck, you reduce the complexity of the information every time you push it through a smaller and smaller bottleneck. Well, hierarchical power is fundamentally reducing the signal every time because it has to now be legible to a new layer, which is a smaller group of people. Now, this layer, Congress, is only, a few thousand people, or 1,000, you get what I'm saying. And then, up from that, you have a smaller group of decision makers. And up from that, you have a smaller group of decision makers. The more hierarchical that a system is, the more that it reduces complexity. Okay? Now understand that when you impose that reduction of complexity onto a complex system, it is damaging for that system. If a system is complex and it has lots of complexity and it relies on its complexity, which all complex systems do, when you impose reductive schemas onto the complex system, it destroys the system. And so what that means is, if we continue to have the state and capitalism, we will continue to destroy the environment. Period. Point blank. So the only way out of the morass is to create horizontal power structures and to rapidly seize control of society through those horizontal power structures. So if you care about the environment, that needed to start yesterday. And if you're not doing that, this is not aimed towards you, but I'm just kind of aiming this towards the general populace of people. If you are not in the process of actively building horizontal power structures, you are probably not doing very much meaningfully to help the environment. Because that is what will ultimately save the environment from the reductive schemas of hierarchical power. Maybe in the meantime, you're helping a little patch. For example, Cooperation Tulsa, we own 2.5 acres of land collectively, and we are cultivating that land, and the biodiversity is increasing, and so on and so on and so on. But if what we thought was that was the extent of our impact, and that was what we were supposed to do, and that all we had to do is say good things about how bad hierarchical structures are and how good horizontal structures are, that would not be sufficient. What has to be done, if you actually care about the environment, the way you have to demonstrate that you care about the environment is you have to build horizontal power structures that have a social revolutionary thrust. That is a true demonstration of environmental values. That's what I think. I think I might have missed a donation. Oh yeah, I missed one from Sam. He says, for $2, he said, "You do shadow work, but I am the shadow master." I don't know if that means you don't do shadow work, but I hope you're doing some shadow work. That seems like a good thing to do. Mason Colbert donated $5. He said, "Anark, speaking of ethics, do you have a particular meta-ethical view you defend? Personally, I am an error theorist and a moral abolitionist. I have a very complicated ethical perspective, which I would summarize as saying that what I think your ethics should depend on the amount of knowledge you have about outcomes. So at base, I'm a consequentialist. I think that what makes something ethically good or bad is based on its consequences. But I think that you should have to choose between. So there's, for people that are listening, consequentialism means that you say something is good or bad based on its consequences. Then there is a subfield of consequentialism called utilitarianism, which is split into two categories: act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism. So act utilitarianism is something is good or bad based discretely upon whether the act produces good or bad consequences. Rule utilitarianism is that you should choose rules that have good consequences. I think that you should be an act utilitarian when you have high knowledge about consequences. When you know for sure what the actual outcomes are going to be an act utilitarian. But when you're not sure, if there's any uncertainty, you should be a rule utilitarianism and a rule utilitarian, and you should fall back on previously established rules, because those rules were established based on a large number of examples, which gave you a way to conclude that those rules were efficient, effective, and led to good outcomes. So, because if you have low information about outcomes, you might do something really regrettable. But if you fall back on the rules that have been established based on their production of good outcomes, you are way less likely to do damage in the process. And you know that you did at best what you could. So And then I even have some elements of virtue ethics in my perspective, insofar as that I think that we have to cultivate good virtues to be able to choose between those, to be able to know, to have the humility to know whether we have good knowledge right now, and whether this knowledge is high fidelity, does give us high confidence, or whether that knowledge is that we have low confidence in that knowledge, and that we should practice humility and fall back upon our readily established principles. So this is, there's a lot more to it than that, but there's your summary, I suppose. YT Usaral says, "Hey Daniel, I've got to ask, are you familiar with the Project Integral by Peter Joseph from the past Zeitgeist movement that he's been developing recently? You should seriously check it out if not." Yeah, I am. I've got numerous people in my orbit who are associated with that stuff. And y'all definitely always tell people about Peter Joseph. So I've heard about it for sure. Knowledge and Defense says, how does a consequentialist judge someone who killed an innocent person on accident? Personally, I do think there's some room for understanding intention, right? I mean, obviously there's some element of, were they negligent? And if they were negligent, obviously there's responsibility in that action. They should be held accountable for the fact that they were negligent. But insofar as that they weren't negligent, I think that intention's an important determining factor, because what we're looking at when we look at that question, what we're really looking at is what should the long-term consequences as punishment or rehabilitation look like, right? We're basically asking, like, should this person be punished, or what would rehabilitation look like for this person given those facts? And what I think is intention is important in understanding if they're going to do repeat behavior. Okay, if their intention was bad, then they're probably going to do repeat behavior, and that means they may not be safe. But if their intention was good, then you really have to figure out how to get their intentions to align with the outcomes. And in this example, if they were not negligent, then their intentions were, it was an accident, right? Like, they did not intend consciously and carry out an action which led to the death of a person. You know, what we'd have to do is we'd have to analyze them, like, getting into the car. Like, I immediately thought of an example. You know, they accidentally killed someone. I was like, I've heard of somebody who their child was laying on the driveway and they accidentally ran over the child. And that's really awful, really terrible. I mean, that's one of the worst things I can imagine happening to a parent. And the thing is that punishment is kind of meaningless there. I mean, insofar as that we're going to bypass the arguments about negligence. But in my understanding, in this particular example, the kid, they couldn't see whether the kid was there or not. They didn't have any reason to believe the kid should be out there. It was just a horrible accident. And then the question is basically like, okay, well, we just have to understand that when I do anything in my life, when I walk out the door, when I use a telephone, when I get in my car and drive somewhere, there's a non-zero chance that I will be a statistic and something terrible will happen through no fault of my own and through no intention of my own. And that is a purely statistical thing. That has nothing to do with me being a good or bad person. That has everything to do with the world just being unexpected and things being, challenging to predict, or edge cases always occurring, right? There will always be bizarre edge cases. The same, this is kind of related, but not directly in a moral sense. Like, flying in a plane, if you look at it, plane deaths by flying in a plane are much, much lower than driving in a car. But we drive in a car every single day, knowing that the fatality rate for driving in a car is, considerably higher than flying in a plane. But, we wouldn't blame if the plane pilot were not negligent, we wouldn't be blaming the plane pilot for crashing the plane if something terrible happened to the plane. So I don't think an accident can really be understood in this paradigm. I do think that or rather, it can be understood. It has a bad outcome, but like the person getting in the car to get out of their driveway, or the pilot getting in the plane to fly the plane, there's no moral burden to what they did because there was no active intention to do the damage. So and furthermore, there's also no way for us to pass judgment on them in a long-term sense because there is no behavior which can be changed, which would not lead to that outcome in the future, right? It's not like, because if the person piloting the plane didn't do anything negligent and the person driving out of the driveway did nothing negligent, then obviously there's no behavior for us to change. There's nothing they can do. There's nothing we could ask them to change to not do the damage in the future. I hope that's a satisfying answer to your question. Zenith, why are you still lying to people? That's not what happened. Those things are already discussed on the server all the time. You're not the first person to bring those things up. You use them as a bludgeon in order to attack people. Like, there are people that already hold those beliefs on the server. They're discussed all the time. You need to stop trying to defend your ego, and you need to get outside yourself a little bit, and you need to recognize that you're being a toxic presence, and that the reason why that people didn't respond well to you was because the way that you approach disagreement is unhealthy. And you're doing it right now. And the fact that you can't accept that is a problem. Zenith, you poor dude. No, you're not doing your shadow work quite clearly. I think you're a very, very good example of somebody who is doing no shadow work. Zenith, nothing I'm doing is oxymoronic. You're just upset. Your ego has been hurt. You've had an ego injury, and you're upset about your ego injury. And that's fine, but you need to do some self-work. Pretty serious self-work. Oof, you should not be teaching on the topic. That is not something you are qualified to teach. I am seeing exactly why you were kicked. Hey, NLH, good to see you, man. Everybody should go follow NLH's channel. He's one of the few people that is actually pushing back against authoritarian leftist arguments. Like, most anarchists have just completely ceded the field, but NLH is one of the few people that is actually doing some work to push back against that. Well, Zenith, there's no fascist-like people running the Discord, and therefore there's nothing to look into. I think, given your behavior here, that they made the right decision. Zahiro says, complex social systems require hierarchical feedback loops to process entropy. Without centralized coordination, decentralized nodes fail to integrate, leading to systemic collapse or informal... yeah. Anyway. Yeah, Zenith, I'm done talking with you. I feel sad for you, to be deadly honest. I think that you are unhealthy and that you have an enormous ego. So Zahiril, complex social systems require hierarchical feedback loops. Well, in the context of complex systems analysis, hierarchy does not mean a hierarchical power structure. Okay. A hierarchical power structure is where there's authoritarianism, that's monopolization of power, and where there is domination, that is to say, exertion through violence, threat of violence, and deception. That is not what hierarchy means in the context of complex systems analysis. Hierarchy just means structure in complex systems analysis. It means integrative structure. So then that's not really a relevant statement in that sense, because in the context of complex systems analysis, anarchists want hierarchy. They want horizontal hierarchy is what it might be called. So not a very relevant statement. Danny ADXZ, NLH is up above. He has a channel, what is it? NLH commentary. Wow, Zenith, you're really making a fool of yourself. It's kind of sad. Socialist Sociopath says, do you think acts of self-defense are justified if we know 100% it would lead to worst outcomes, negative utility? Yeah, I would say, well, I mean, I get what you're saying. That's actually a pretty good counterexample. I'll have to think that one through a little further. So I'll give you my intuitive response. My intuitive response is that we should want to normalize the usage of self-defense, because everywhere where we begin to make exceptions for the people not being allowed to defend themselves, we lead to a total decrease in utility, because we lead to people second guessing their right to defend themselves, if that makes sense. I also don't think it's really possible theoretically to have 100% confidence about anything that's going to happen. So I do consider that kind of a wild hypothetical. I don't think it should be entertained upon its like bare merits, but I think it's an interesting thought experiment at least. Yeah, Mr. Poss is saying what I'm saying, and it's important to look at how such a thing would impact everything in context, not just that one situation. Exactly. Because I think that you couldn't have 100% confidence that something would lead to worse outcomes, that self-defense would lead to worse outcomes, because we have to look at the agglomerate outcome as well. We have to look like what it looks like as when we develop social rules and then we diminish them. What happens to the total agglomerate ethical state of our society when we diminish even those individual examples? Because I don't think that you would ever get 100% confidence that something wouldn't lead to bad outcomes if we didn't defend a person's right to self-defense. That being said, obviously, there are many examples of self-defense where we do care about proportionality, right? Like if a person is bugging you, it would be self-defense to kind of push them away, but it would not be self-defense to shoot them, right? Like, proportionality matters. Self-defense is not a complete universal, or rather it's a universal, but it's universal with proportionality in mind. That's what I would say. And so I think that for me, the pure hypothetical where we say, you have 100% confidence, and then we don't give the example, where we don't like quantify or qualify it within material structure, and we don't understand it within an exact and precise existing context, and we imagine it as an abstract, I think that's very likely the problem of the thought experiment. Because I think that as soon as we were to take the thought experiment and then ground it with an example, we would find that the hypothetical falls apart, that there isn't going to be an example of that. That's what I think. Sarah Doe says, hey, hi, Anark, do you think there are circumstances where we shouldn't support something, even if it objectively leads to better outcomes overall? For example, banning cars would reduce accidental deaths. I don't know. I consider myself somewhat agnostic on cars. It's true. Absolutely. It would reduce accidental deaths, but banning cars would have also some negative effects, right? Like there's a bunch of people for which like public transportation is never going to be usable for them based on something about their life. Maybe they are disabled and they can only travel at very specific times. They're going to need a car in order to get there. They need isolation. They can't be exposed to the public all the time. There's always going to be a need for automobiles in that sense. So like, when I'm looking at pretty much all the hypotheticals that people will offer to me on this subject, I kind of have those similar answers that I did for the previous person where, you know, they were talking about self-defense and 100% confidence about it having negative outcomes. And almost always the more grounded it gets, we start to realize that it's kind of complicated, that it's complex, the sorts of effects that it would have, what the consequences would actually be. And I think in part of my analysis is I think act utilitarianism is insufficient all by itself. So act utilitarianism, just reminding people again, act utilitarianism is when you only look at the outcome of the individual act and that determines the good or badness. Rule utilitarianism is when you say, I'm trying to develop rules that lead to good outcomes, agglomerate good outcomes. And what I think is that these cannot be taken separately from one another. I think that when you look even at an individual act, okay, so when you look at an individual act and you look at its outcomes just in isolation, that's not enough for you to actually determine what its total outcomes are. You know, even if in that exact particular circumstance, it was fine, we can't say that we have established that that act is acceptable at scale, because if we were to repeat that act, it's quite possible that the normalization of that act would lead to bad outcomes. So this is what Kant calls the categorical imperative. The categorical imperative, Kant says, is basically where you ask yourself, if I were to take this action and that I were to will it, that this action were multiplied or extended to be carried out by everyone, would this action be acceptable? If not, then we probably shouldn't carry it out on the singular level. Now, Kant takes that and he turns it into a whole deontological, like strict rule structure from which nobody can really, vary at all. He has this concept of duties, and this establishes a complex rule system that is invariant. So I don't agree with his extrapolations there, because I think that that categorical imperative is going to be different depending on how it enters into feedback with the conditions at hand. So the conditions at hand may determine that a particular rule is going to go well when it's in a particular kind of society. Some rules are just universals. You know, thou shalt not murder is pretty universal, right? Thou shalt not, there's a variety. I think y'all can imagine what those might be. But there's also a bunch of kind of moral rules that are conditional to the situation, right? Like, okay, for example, the rule, when you are in a relationship with somebody, you should not sleep with somebody else. That's true for monogamy. That is a rule in monogamy, and that rule being followed does lead to good outcomes if you're in a monogamous relationship. But if you're in polyamory, that rule is just completely, it doesn't really apply anymore, right? So like moral rules are conditional, and this is why I don't think that deontology is a very good framework. Moral rules are conditional to the circumstances of the people who are involved in the material conditions they occupy. So I don't know if that felt like a good answer or not, but looks like we got, two donations, and one of these, let's see here. The older of the two is from Ceylon, 1999 for $50. Damn, $50. I appreciate you so much. That, little do you know, that's going to help me make it to the end of the month. They said, maybe a silly question, but do we need, I'll get to that $5 one as well. Don't worry. Maybe a silly question, but do we need an anarchist Joe Rogan? Been seeing Hassan Piker everywhere lately. He was even on a New York Times show where he's quoting Mao and Lenin. Absolutely. Yes. I think one of the problems is it's very hard to kind of break in when, as an anarchist, you are not doing an analysis which is familiar to large groups of people. Also, in general, anarchists practice means ends unity. And so they're not willing to do a bunch of things which would be effective in getting them noticed but they're not willing to do because they find them to be unethical. For example, if I wanted this channel to blow up, what I would do is I would save up a bunch of money, and then I would start paying people to clip farm my entire channel, start like 60 accounts, and then just post clips of my videos and my live streams. And that's it. Just spam the algorithm on every social media with my stuff, and just clip my stuff together and find all the stuff that's going to get people's attention, and try to get I would, hire a bunch of bots and have those bots be in every comment section. Oh, do you know what Anark said about blah, 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 blah? You should respond to Anark. Watch this video by Anark. Anark is so great. That would be one way to do it, or to hire, to buy a bunch of subscribers, to buy a bunch of views, the list goes on. If one wanted to push their channel super hard, any of these things would be very, very helpful. And I suspect that there are people who are doing them who are not even telling us. As for Hassan was just lucky that his uncle was Cenk Uygur with the Young Turks. I think that was a huge help to him. It was also helpful that he's a very attractive guy. It was also helpful that he worked his fucking ass off. I mean, Hassan is on stream like 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. That is an insane amount of work ethic. So I think that is also a contributor. For me to be able to commit that kind of thing to the channel would require this channel to be doing a lot better than it's doing. And for this channel to be doing a lot better than it's doing, it would require me to do things that I find unethical or unsavory. It should also be said that, the goal I have with this channel is I want this channel to be about political, like the deep end of political theory and philosophy and stuff like that. I'm not trying to make a channel that is like only doing like introductory primers or like just media analysis. That's not like those things are off the table. In fact, I'm going to be releasing a video soon called The House is on Fire, which is purposely an introductory video that will be coming out on May 1st. If you want early access to that video, The House is on Fire, you should go over to my Patreon, because if you become a patron for any amount, you'll get early access to that video. So go over there and watch The House is on Fire, because I actually put a lot of effort into this introductory video, okay? And then, that's one part of it. I don't want to become somebody who all I do is just a bunch of live streams and just a bunch of clips. I would be willing to do more live streams, but I don't want my entire presence on the internet to just become me doing hot takes, me commenting on the newest news story, me talking about current events. Like, I know that stuff just leads to a lowering of quality over time. It leads to me watering down my media. So I put this all in my own personal context because I just want to explain why I think it is that perhaps anarchists aren't blowing up like sock dims. Also, I've numerous times mentioned why I think anarchism is less intuitively palatable to people who've been told that they need hierarchical power structures. Anarchism as a word definitely gets people's hackles up. They think that it's about chaos and bomb throwing. And, all of these things enter into the conversation. So I just want to say this. If you want this channel to enter into the wider public conversation, that requires y'all doing the legwork of actually pushing my channel, defending the videos I make, and trying to understand my theory, taking my theory out into the world and applying it, giving me credit where credit is due. I'm not going to do those things other than what I do organically. Okay. I'm not going to I'll make shorts and stuff, but I'm never going to be one of these people that's going to hire like 60 accounts to do it for me. That requires y'all as my watchers, as my subscribers, to be motivated enough to do that. If you want me to have more of a prominent position, you have to do the work of pushing my content. You have to watch my videos. You have to click when the thumbnails come up. You have to subscribe and like them and comment. Like, you have to be very active and, like present in make me a name in the discussion, because otherwise people like Hassan are going to get big. People like Bad Empanada are going to get big, and the movement will continue to fall into opportunism, and the red-brown pipeline will just get more and more powerful. Not to say I think that Hassan's involved in the red-brown pipeline, but I think you get what I'm saying. So I missed a bunch of donations here. I'm going to get back and let's see here. Okay. AJ Prince for $5 says, Anark, do you have any tips on best practices of social insertion when in the context of people or organizations that are very hierarchical realist? Well, I just want to say that social insertion is not about entering into orgs and making them horizontal. Okay. That is not what social insertion is. In Especifismo, there's a distinction between what you might call the political organization, the specifically anarchist organization, which is a horizontal organization with strong points of unity and all of that, okay? And then what is called the social movement, okay? The social movement are those organic movements of the people, and those organic movements of the people are not things like the DSA, are not things like PSL, are not things like CPUSA. Those are not the organic movement of the people. That is what I would call a political organization, and what Especifismo would call a political organization. So entering into political organizations in order to horizontalize them, I just want to note that's not what social insertion is. Social insertion is when we as radicals, as horizontalists, as anarchists, make ourselves present in organic movements of the people. For example, Stop Cop City, all of the George Floyd protests, the Palestine movement, or the anti-Zionist movement. Our presence in those and being present and helping spur them towards liberatory activity, that's what social insertion is. So I just want to be clear that what you're discussing, I would need to know more details, but it may actually be entryism and not social insertion. That being said, what I would say is you need to present the practical arguments for horizontalizing rather than just critiquing and criticizing or just presenting the alternative viewpoint. Instead, I think what you have to do is you would need to be an active part in trying to present, like, well, if you do that, these are going to be the problems. Like, oh, okay, you want one person to call all the shots. Well, what happens when that person gets sick? What happens when that person goes to the hospital? What happens if that person dies? What happens if that person is targeted by the CIA? Things like this. Right? But I got to say, if you enter into a hierarchical political organization, it is very unlikely you're going to convince them to make it horizontal, because power structures will tend to perpetuate themselves, and hierarchical power structures will tend to perpetuate hierarchical power relations. So I hope that was helpful. Next donation was from Black Anarchist 1992 for $5. I appreciate you. He said, what have you learned from Black historical figures that has informed and continues to inform your radicalism? So I've said this many, many times, but I was very, very influenced by Lorenzo Gamboa Irvin. And I think a big part of it was that Irvin is an unashamed anarchist, but he had a lot of very good critiques of the white anarchist movement and the errors that white anarchists were making in interacting with Black liberation. And I found that, for example, a lot of the time white anarchists will enter into Black spaces and they will have this very kind of paternalistic view, like they know better, like they're trying to tell them what to do. And this always is going to come off wrong, because there's a history of white people entering into Black spaces and making demands or criticizing. And then when the Black people in those spaces don't concede, they just like disappear. Or it turns into a big argument, or it devolves into things which have a very anti-Black sort of tone to them, for example. And that very much informed my approach during the George Floyd protests. Very much informed me being very considerate about how I entered Black spaces. Another one is that he mentions that a lot of white anarchists enter Black spaces and they're there for a day and then they're out. Like, they're just not there for the long haul. And that's why once again, that was very influential for me, especially during the George Floyd protests, because it encouraged me, and I think a Cooperation Tulsa by proxy, to enter into hopefully much more long-term relationships with those people in the Black community that we had reached out to. And to this day, a lot of those connections have remained because of Irvin, to be honest, because of Anarchism in the Black Revolution. I think that book was very helpful. And I think that it's helpful for whether you're Black or white, because it has things to offer to you regardless. But I think that white anarchists need to hear a lot of what is in that book. Also, just got to say, big fan of Frantz Fanon, right? You just said Black historical figures. I don't know if Fanon, though, like, influenced me as much as I read Fanon and was like, oh, yeah, bro, I'm so glad you said that. I've been waiting for somebody to say that. Yeah, no, I think his like psychological analyses in Black Skin, White Masks was really, really, I don't know. I don't want to say it was interesting, but it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. And I think it gave me an insight into the mind of the colonized person, such that I felt like I had a more universalizing understanding of oppression. And so those are just some examples. Next one is from NLH Commentary for $2. And he said, are social media platforms biased towards us? I mean, they're certainly not biased towards anarchists. I think that social media, if anything, not to be conspiratorial, but it sure seems like that they are actively discriminating against anarchists. In fact, it seems to me like people are hiring bots and making fake accounts only exclusively for the purpose of trying to bully anarchists out of leftist spaces, trying to harass anarchists off the internet. It's what it seems like to me. And in a lot of places it's worked. A lot of anarchists have just stopped using the internet, which maybe there's upsides to that. But a lot of them also have just been harassed into abandoning their principles. And it sure seems like the algorithm does not favor anarchism. It sure seems like if you put anarchism in your name, if you put anarchism in your tags, that the algorithm automatically deboosts you. So certainly, and I suspect you know what I'm saying right now is true because you've already experienced it. You've told me about it on TikTok. Yeah, no, they're not biased towards us. They were definitely biased against us. Voltarine Kropotkin donated €5. They said, hi, Anark. Could you speak a little on your thoughts regarding Marxian economics versus capitalist power economics in a social anarchist context? Yeah, that one's interesting because I've gone like back and forth. I think capitalist power offers very interesting and unique insights. It has good criticisms of Marxist economics. Primarily what it says is that socially necessary labor time is still very abstract and is not quantifiable. And it analyzes the papers that have attempted to do so, and it showed that the arguments are essentially circular. And I think those critiques are valuable. Those are good critiques. And I especially enjoy that they gave those critiques and they do not then resort to a bourgeois mentality. They do not then just resort to capitalist apologia. They are radicals. They are revolutionary. They still are within the leftist milieu, but they are no longer strictly Marxist. And I also think that one thing that capitalist power offers that I valued was understanding, and this is not only them, this is also, for example, Lewis Mumford. They offer an understanding of capitalism as being a subsuming force that subsumes all of the institutions around it, and it does so through quantization by making everything have a dollar value. Once again, I'm not saying this is like completely distinct from Marxism. Marx said the same thing. In fact, quantization is one of the main forces leading to commodity production. Not use value, like or sale value, or what's it called? I think you all know what I'm talking about. It's what leads to that. So, but I think that they've offered a very rigorous formulation. Another thing is that I think that they offer a more objective metric for understanding what capital actually is. And capital is a form of power. They even have created a formula, and this formula can be quantified. You can actually go and find each of these factors in their formula as things which can be directly measured, and then these can be used in order to predict phenomena, and they have a high degree of predictability, higher on average than the competing models. So I think that it is a very compelling economic theory. But yeah, that's my perspective. Yeah, somebody, Milton says, I think if you wanted to blow up, you'd have to do a lot more response videos and then get into the debate circuit like on modern day debate. Verbal blood sports have become very popular lately. Yeah, see, I think that's something that I told myself when I began the channel I thought was a perverse incentive, and I was trying to avoid it. I don't want to do the blood sports. I want to only engage in good faith debates. It's not to say that I think I wouldn't do well at blood sports. In fact, I think when I was younger, I was somebody who engaged very actively in it, on the internet and off the internet. And I am very good at it. I can be extremely ruthless. I can be very, very ruthless. I can humiliate people, but that's not an impulse I want to encourage in myself. I think it's bad for me to encourage that impulse in myself because I'm also less happy when I give into that impulse. The more I give into that impulse, I am more stressed and unhappy on a daily basis. And I think I bring that unhappiness into my personal life. And it's bad for the people around me because I always have this cortisol in my body. There's always this anxious annoyance just under my skin. I'm annoyed with some stupid thing I saw somebody say, or now I'm going to write this. And it's like, what I decided at a certain point was that I wanted to take all of that and I wanted to funnel it into the production of a much more robust critique, which was not going to be possible for them to, if they were to straw man it, it would be because they didn't fucking read it, right? I wanted to be so comprehensive, so irrefutable that people would read it for decades to come as a refutation of that perspective. And that's what made this channel. Okay. And so when I made this channel, I made it kind of with the intention not to engage in those kinds of blood sports. And I would maybe only do so on very particular occasions where I thought it was worthwhile. But really, I don't think it's a good thing for me in general. One thing that I might do, one perverse incentive I would maybe give into is doing more response videos. But even then, I've taken the position of only doing response videos like when people are reaching out to me saying, hey, you should do a response video. Instead of doing one every time I think I should do one, which is like, as I said, if I were the one choosing, I'd probably be constantly arguing with people. But it's instead when people reach out to me and they're like, hey, Daniel, I watched this and I really think you should do a response. Hey, Daniel, somebody said this and I think you should do a response. And if I just get one person that says that, who cares? But if I start getting 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people who are in my coalition who are saying that, then that's when I consider doing response videos and stuff. So, but you're absolutely right. Absolutely. I think I've missed. Yeah, I just keep, dang. Okay, I'm missing so many questions. Give me a sec. Okay. I only have 2 more. Wow, Masuda Trent donated $30. Thank you so much. They said, I finished A Modern Anarchism in my local book club and ordered a few of the full version from my local anarchist bookstore. Thank you. No, thank you. That's awesome. I love hearing that. I hope that when the book actually gets published and that there's more actual full physical copies, I hope to hear about more book clubs, and I'd be happy to attend people's book clubs, at least online if I can, in person, I suppose, if they're near enough. I definitely want to go on a circuit, pitching the book and all of that. So I'm really happy to hear that y'all, did a reading of it and, that it was substantive and transformative for you. Next one. Sarah Doe says, Zahiril in chat is questioning anarchism from the perspective of systems theory. Yeah, I addressed them earlier. I don't know if they've said something new. I don't know if they've said anything new. I already addressed the first thing that they said. Oh, okay. They said left anarchism lacks requisite variety. That is absolutely not true. That's the strength of left anarchism is requisite variety. They said a horizontal system cannot generate enough internal complexity to regulate modern global stressors without evolving formal vertical. I just disagree completely. I don't think that's true at all. In fact, I think that if you develop vertical subsystems, that is what reduces requisite variety. That is a reducing factor. Every time you create verticality, you reduce complexity. Complexity has to come from signals being conveyed through junctures. And when you minimize the number of people that interact with a given stressor, that interact with it and make decisions about it, you reduce that number, you reduce requisite variety in the process. This is why, for example, Stafford Beer, when he visited Chile and did CyberSyn, actually came to the conclusion that a worker system, a system of workers' councils where workplaces make decisions, was actually more in line with cybernetics and with systems theory than capitalism. He had been developing firms for capitalists his entire life. And so obviously he thought that these were, fine examples of how to build a complex system. But then he went and he developed CyberSyn in Chile and came to the conclusion that he was wrong. So that indicates you're incorrect. That indicates that, in fact, a more horizontal system is what allows requisite variety. In fact, I would say it is the prerequisite to having requisite variety, that the more vertical systems you create, the less requisite variety you will have, because you will have more and more complexity reduction. So if you'd like to learn more about this, I actually go into pretty considerable depth in part 2 of A Modern Anarchism. I address this idea very directly. All right, so let's see here. Next is Jackalope, gave $5. He says, if we just keep donating complicated questions, Anark will never be able to leave. Damn. Yeah, that's seeming kind of true. But I'll probably only be on here for another 20, 30 minutes. Yeah. Hypnosis, thank you. Exchange value. I was like, sale value? Price? Yeah, no, exchange value. Thank you very much. That's what I couldn't think of. By the way, Zahiro, I appreciate that you are engaging upon with the theoretical constructs that my work actually involves. Okay. I think that I appreciate that, because there's so much of the time when I'm interacting with somebody where they're just not even engaging with the actual content and construct of my work. But I appreciate that, Zahiro, you're actually engaging with the content of my work. I disagree with the things you're saying, and I give my rebuttals, but this is at least a good faith and a properly academic approach to disagreement. Long Defiant has now been a member for 28 months. That is incredible. That is so awesome. He said, I've had a pretty good reception as an anarchist on Substack. Come join us. You're like the 3rd or 4th person that's told me to do that. That's possible. That's possible. I just don't want to have to write things all the time. It's just very, very, time intensive. One thing I do want to say, because, we only have like 20 minutes left on the stream, maybe 30 at most. I have been working on a video for months now, really more than a year, called The House is on Fire. And this video is meant to be the most base level radicalizing primer that you could hand to literally anyone. Okay. It is written at a 5th grade reading level, and I utilized public health messaging in order to make sure that it had a structure that was proven by science to be good for reaching people and persuading them. Okay. And it has taken me a long time to write the script and the filming and all of that. The video is now almost complete, It is going to be released on May 1st. However, if you would like to get early access to that video, if you'd like to see it early and you'd like to read the script, you can go over to my Patreon and become a patron for any amount. And when you do, you'll get access to that video. People have been telling me they really liked it so far. It's been getting very good reception. So I hope you go over to Patreon and become a patron for any amount, because right now I actually really need it. I really need the money. I'm certainly like kind of on hard times. And also I'm going to be, the Dual Power, or Woodbine is going to be having a Dual Power gathering in New York City, and they're going to be flying me out to New York City, which is great. I appreciate it. But also New York City is very expensive. So even though I'm not trying to go on a wild spending spree or anything, I'm living on Tulsa economy kind of money here. So I need to save up money, which means I can spend even less of the money I don't have. So I'm kind of stressed about money. I appreciate y'all donating. That's certainly very helpful. So with that in mind, I'm going to return back to answering donations. Next one is from Freestyle Skate for $2. They said, thoughts on Richard Wolff? Richard Wolff, I appreciate that he is pushing workers' cooperatives, and he is actually pushing worker self-directed enterprises, like specifically. Okay. And I really appreciate that. Me and him, maybe wouldn't agree on everything else. Like, he has a very positive view of China, for example. But I appreciate that he's pushing workers' cooperatives. And in that sense, I think that he's a net positive. But I do think I have lots of I would, if me and him sat down, have plenty of disagreements, but I think we would also have plenty of agreements. And I also think that for a time, he was one of the most valuable educators on actual Marxist theory, and not Marxist-Leninism, but actually Marxist thoughts. And he did some very good lectures on those. So I appreciate his work on those things. But next, NLH commentary says, thoughts on Gabriel Rockhill. Honestly, Gabriel Rockhill, he strikes me as the type of guy who himself is in like the PMC, the professional managerial class. Like, he's in academia. He's among these academics all the time. And he kind of like how a middle-class kid, and this is not to insult anybody who's grown up middle-class here, but, a lot of middle-class kids kind of grow up and then they like develop this resentment against middle-class kids. And they like do this like edgy thing where they like try to pivot to being like, I don't know, kind of like very counterculture to cover up for the fact that they are essentially coming from a more privileged background. Gabriel Rockhill is giving me those vibes from academia. So like, he has no connection to the actual movement on the ground. So he now wants to be anti-PMC, right? Now he's pivoting. It's like a form of self-flagellation. It's a form of internal guilt that he has for being part of the PMC. And so then he goes looking for the candidate or the person who is the cause of all of these problems seen in academia producing the professional managerial class. And he is unable to do so because he has no connection to the movement of the people. He has no connection to the average person because he is a PMC himself. And because he has no connection to the average person, he has no connection to the movement, then he just kind of finds another sort of academic perspective, Marxist-Leninism and campism, and he doubles down on this other PMC perspective, deriving from Lenin himself, who was sort of the king of this PMC perspective, himself being the one who pushed Taylorism, which is a capitalistic scientific work program, onto the workers of Soviet Russia. It makes sense that then he would be very attracted to this sort of administrative top-down approach where he gets to be part of the vanguard and he gets to tell everybody what to do. And so, yeah, it's his whole ideology and all of his sort of appearances and all of his writing is a form of self-flagellation where, because he has so much distance from the actual movement of the people, because he is so alienated from the perspectives of the average person and their needs, he essentially then just takes on another sort of privileged managerial administrative way of thinking, because to him it appears more radical. So yeah, that being said, I agree with a lot of his critiques about the sort of navel-gazing dead end of postmodernism. I think postmodernism offered useful things, but it's about time for us to move on and to synthesize and to sort of reintroduce elements of modernism, or reintroduce structuralist elements that were very helpful. I do think that it's about time for us to reclaim a more materialist perspective. It's time for us to reclaim a focus on universalism, reclaim common interest. I do think all of these things are important. But Gabriel Rockhill has no solution to the problem. His solution is to essentially try to resurrect a failed version of revolutionary co-option. And to him, this feels radical. It makes him feel close to the workers, but he has no organic connection to the people. So next one is from Sida for €5. And they said, the idea of super chats is so dystopian. Having the power to say if the person can eat or not is disgusting. This is capitalism. Thank you for your contribution to the fight against all hierarchy. Well, I agree, but I do appreciate the super chats. I appreciate you giving. Like I said, I really need it. I'm going to be going to speak at the Dual Power Gathering, the Woodbine Gathering in New York City in second week of May. Yeah, that's right. Second week of May. If you're in New York City, that's your opportunity to meet me, by the way. And if you know somebody like runs a podcast or some kind of interview thing in New York City, or they want to sit down and have a talk, if you know any radicals that are out there who won't be at the Woodbine thing, but they want to talk, this is the perfect opportunity for us to meet. So just keep that in mind. I will be in New York City, I think it's the 12th. No, it's the 14th through the 21st, I think. It's the 14th through the 21st. Let me check about that. No, it'll be the 12th through the 19th. I will be in New York City. So, yeah. Also, if you have some killer place for me and my partner to stay, because my partner will also be coming with me to New York City, that would be awesome. Tell me if you've got a place for us to stay. As you probably well know, if you live in New York City, it's a very expensive place. And once again, I got that Tulsa money, not that New York City money. So yeah. Anyway, let's see here. Socialist Sociopath says, thoughts on unlearning economics? I love his channel. I can tell that if me and him sat down, we would disagree on a lot. But I cannot help but respect the man's rigor. Okay. He does not say things he has not researched. Okay. I respect that he is a true academic, that when he makes a critique, it's very well backed. He's going to give you the papers. He's going to give you citations. I respect that. So even when I disagree with him, I'm like, all right, well, we disagree, but I see how you've come to that perspective. But the truth is I don't disagree with him very often. I mean, mostly he's just got a lot of good points. I think he's got good critiques. He's very well informed. Clearly a very, very educated guy. Like his channel a lot, actually. Why to Sarah says, do you perhaps plan on actively participating in the integral once it actually gets underway? I suspect it'll be pretty soon. Hell, imagine Co-op Tulsa being one of the OG autonomous nodes. I don't know enough about it specifically to know how we would get involved. But if what you're saying is it's basically like a federated network, that might be the case. That might be what ends up happening. I'd be very interested to see what happens. Oh, I got a $10 donation from Labor Syndicalist. He says, good luck in New York. I appreciate it. I have never been to New York. I've been out to the East Coast before, went out to Delaware, been out to the West Coast before, went out to Los Angeles, San Diego, been out to Portland, I've been to Seattle, but I've never been to New York. So this is my first time going to New York, and certainly my first time going to New York City. So I'm looking forward to it, honestly. I know it's a pretty cool place, so I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to my introduction to the city being meeting with other radicals there. So Danny 80XZ says, could you do a social gathering once you arrive? If there were enough people that wanted to meet, I'd be down to meet people in New York City who watch the channel or are organizers and radicals. That would be awesome. That would be super cool. Yeah, totally open to that. Pin Archive says, I'd stay away from Times Square personally. I hate it there. You know, I'm not much of a sightseer as a tourist. When I'm a tourist, I'm a food tourist, so I like to eat good food. And I don't know, what do they call it? Local life tourist. Like, I want to just like go out to a bar and just like watch live music and stuff. Like, that's kind of the way that I like to travel. So yeah, I'll be there with my partner, and she's a musician, so we'll probably be going out to a lot of live music. Anark going out there with big city dreams. No, I couldn't. If I made the money I'm making right now, I couldn't live in New York City. So absolutely not. Sarah Doe says, radical autonomy is a myth. Behavior is dictated by causal chains. Anarchism's voluntary order ignores that humans require external constraints to override biological and social programming. No, it doesn't. That's just not true. That's not an accurate description of anarchism. Anarchism is not voluntarism. Anarchism doesn't require radical free will. I am a hard determinist. So you're not engaging with the actual perspectives of anarchism, nor my work when you say that. I'm a hard determinist. I'm a systems theorist. I do not believe in libertarian free will. I don't believe there is such thing as free will. I believe that everything is strictly determined by material conditions, physicality, the material world. That's it. So when you say that, that means that you are not aware of the breadth of anarchist theory, and you should go read or watch A Modern Anarchism, because you will find that it really has no appeal to free will or a necessity of autonomous action. Socialist Sociopath says, have you seen Yui's video on value? It doesn't ring a bell. So I'm going to give me just a sec. It doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like I've seen it. It doesn't show that I watched it, but I'd be super down to watch that. I'm always open to hear like critiques and, elaborations on things like labor theory of value and Marxist economic theory and things like that. So. Give me just a sec. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay. Whoa, received $50 from Buy Furious. Y'all been so generous today. I appreciate it so much, honestly. This is all going towards that New York trip. Buy Furious says, my dad was one of those, quote, be socially liberal but fiscally conservative, unquote, types. But I've been sending him a lot of your videos. He says he really likes your material. Can't wait for your The House is on Fire to be the final nail in the coffin. I hope that's the case. That would be awesome. And I'm really glad that he's been enjoying the videos. Yeah, no, that's really cool. Yeah, I hope The House is on Fire is actually effective. You know, it's like, it's one thing to be like, oh, I did all of the thinking to make sure that this is persuasive, and like I tried to appeal to people where they were at. But at the end of the day, it's all about where the rubber meets the road. At the end of the day, it's about like, is it actually persuasive? Do people actually get radicalized by it? Does it cause them to think about things in a new way? And I'll be interested to see if it has that kind of effect, because I don't know. We'll find out. Aw, Danny says, because we love you. Thank you, Danny. That's a nice thing to say. Arachno Anarchy says, hey, Anark, thanks for the signed copies of A Modern Anarchism. I'm excited to read through them soon. Hope you're doing well. All power to the people. Hell yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I'm so looking forward to having the compiled version of the text. That's going to be so, so cool. That'll be later this year in the winter. So yeah. Awesome. Anark is a true Rizzler. Yeah, that's what everybody always says. Cool Dude says, to what degree do you believe we can include Marxian analysis in our own? For example, Marx's critique of the political economy. I think that a lot of it can be included. A lot. I think that Marx's theory of alienation is one that is very, very conducive to anarchism. I think that Marx's theory of alienation, if you just take the logic of his theory of alienation and you extend it into the state, you extend it to an analysis of white supremacy and patriarchy and all of those things, that you'll just find that like it is especially powerful, for example, in application with the state. The state is a form of alienation over the control over civil affairs and society. We're all forced to carry out the dictums of the state. We're all forced to reproduce the society that the state tells us we have to exist in. And yet we have no control over what the state decides. We are all alienated from control over the civil functions of society. So Marx's theory of alienation, I think if you just take it to its maximum extent, it implies anarchism. I've always found that Marx really did not go far enough with his theory of alienation, but that it applies very, very well to the economy. So 100%. I do think there's a lot of value in his critique of capital and how quantization of value leads to these sorts of perverse incentives. It leads to the reduction of the complexity of human life. It leads to profit hoarding and the pursuit of profit. It leads to the destruction of informal communistic economies. It is itself a voracious, expansive entity that cares nothing for the logic of human need. I think that these things are all very true. I take a lot of inspiration from Marx. I disagree with some things that he did and said, but I can disagree with things that a person does and says while still finding value in their work. And Marx is certainly one of those figures that I'm very inspired by Marx. Marx was my leftist radical training wheels. Okay. Like the introduction to Marx's theories and learning about Marx was what made me become radicalized. It was just that also I was learning about anarchism, and the more I learned about anarchism, it really just seemed like it was the natural outcome of understanding Marx. If you understood Marx, then just keep going. You should basically end up as an anarchist. That has always been my perspective. That has not changed. I think Marx himself just failed to take his own ideas to their fullest extent. Scotty Too Hottie says energy flows toward concentration. In the vacuum of formal power, informal power pools around high influence nodes. Without a counterstructure, horizontalism is just a masked, unaccountable hierarchy. See, this is like halfway between understanding what I'm trying to say and not engaging with my work. So at least what you're trying to do is talk about what I'm saying within the context of systems theory. But you think that I want informality? Horizontality does not mean informality. Horizontality means that power is shared among the people within the structure. They can delegate things, and that delegation can be revoked. They can create formal structures. In fact, I advocate they do. I'm a formalist. I'm very, very formalist. I am, in fact, very deeply critical of informal tendencies within anarchism. I think that informality leads to hierarchies. But I just want to note that you're kind of saying this as if it's a gotcha. And it's not a gotcha. It just kind of shows you're not really engaging with my work as my work stands. You're engaging with maybe systems theory, but you're not engaging with how my work interacts with systems theory. Got another donation from P. Rose from Church Street for $10. They said, prefiguration in Barcelona took 46 years from 18... Oh, baby. Okay. No. Oh, wow. Okay. That was disastrous. He said, prefiguration in Barcelona took 46 years from 1890 to 1936. See class, culture, and conflict. Roughly. I'm so hoping we could do that in the USA by 2072. Big thanks for dropping knowledge, Anark. All power to the people. Yeah, this is the thing. I'm always telling people, Murray. Oh my God. Okay. At least he didn't hit the microphone this time. Yeah, this is something I tell people all the time. Prefiguration is not fast because revolution isn't fast. Okay. Revolutions come after there has been enough creation of a counterpower that the counterpower can now vie for, I guess you might say, a horizontal hegemony in our occasion, but like, you know, a power structural hegemony by contrast to the one that exists. So it takes a long time to develop alternative power structures. I just want to note that capitalism really got its start in a noticeable or sort of discernible form in like the 1500s and only in a couple countries, like a few countries. Okay. It took until like the 1800s, the 17 or 1800s for that to get to like fruition, such that the capitalists were a distinct class that could actually vie for power against the prevailing power structures. So the idea that we're just going to do a coup and put things in place differently from the top is ignorant. It's ignorant of history, and it's ignorant of how power structures work. You cannot just create a power structure from the top, okay? Gall's Law. Gall's Law says... Oh, where is it? I didn't expect... There we go. Oh my gosh. A complex system that works is invariably found to have evolved from a simple system that worked. A complex system designed from scratch never works and cannot be patched up to make it work. You have to start over with a working, simple system. That is anarchism. Anarchism is starting from the bottom up, making the simple working systems, and then iterating upon those simple systems at larger and larger scales. Okay. This also goes towards the person that thought that I advocate informality. Like anybody who engages with my work knows that's not true. Instead, what I'm saying is we have to create formal horizontal structures that at the simplest scale, small scales, and then we have to iterate them formally at larger and larger scales as they demonstrate their coherence and functionality. Okay. So that is essentially the goal. That is the process at hand. And that's only gonna happen if we do it. That's only gonna happen if we actively go about creating the alternative structures. Because if all we do is just sit back and let things develop as they will, we are never going to revolutionize society in that process. Revolution requires the creation of a large-scale, formal counterpower. And that takes place by starting by making small scale, simple counterpowers. So it's going to take some time, and it's time to get started, y'all. Yeah, as Sissy Finboy says, the coup is in between and very bloody. Yeah, the coup comes later. The coup only happens once you have so much power that it's like, oh, I'm just basically confirming that I am the actual hegemonic structure here. You know, it doesn't happen before, because if what happens is you carry out a coup before you are the obvious prevailing structure, well, that means you haven't had time to change the conditions of society. Power structures exist in 4 different fields, and those fields are individual conditioning, that's people's psychology, expectations, ideas, beliefs. Interpersonality, those are people's immediate relationships, their friends, their family, their coworkers, etc. Social structures, those are the systems that are either imposed upon or created by human beings, such as laws, organizations, white supremacy, good and bad things, okay? And the fourth one is the environment, or what I call environmental structures. And those are things that are non-human and were humans to stop existing, or were living things to continue, stop existing, would continue to exist. So that would be, the surrounding things. Okay. The environment we dwell within, you might say. Those all have to be changed by the power structures we develop. If those are not changed, then we can do a coup, but we will have now just inherited all of the old individual conditioning, all the old ideas and psychologies and expectations, all the old ways of relating to our friends and families and loved ones, all the old social systems and how they enforce themselves, and the old environmental structure that includes infrastructure just as much as it includes things like plants and animals and so on. Okay. So we have to do the work of the slow grind of changing all four of those in order to create alternative power structures. That is the thesis of my work. Xena Grelis says, anarchist struggle prepares us for the coming collapse and the next. That's exactly right. Mike, working for Green 3766, has been a member for 21 months. That is awesome. He said, what books do you recommend on holistic cities? I will say this is not a place I have expertise. I'd like to just say that up front. But I did read Bookchin's, what is it? Bookchin's Urbanization Without Cities. Yes, Urbanization Without Cities. This one's really cool. I got a lot out of Urbanization Without Cities. I think there was some really good stuff here, and I really like his focus on the municipality as the sort of atom of organizing, but also the city itself as something that can be radically reconstructed by movements from the bottom up. So that's my best recommendation, but I won't pretend that I have like an extensive knowledge on the subject. Exile 5 says, so the USSR became what it was because of Gall's law. That is precisely correct. That is why every authoritarian leftist project fails. Gall's law is why they fail. It's also why authoritarianism never lasts. Authoritarianism builds up and then it destroys itself. It's auto-cannibalistic because you can't create a complex system from above. You can create a complicated system from above, but complicated systems are not usually complex systems, or usually will never become complex systems. They're like Rube Goldberg machines rather than organisms. And in that sense, when you try to create this Rube Goldberg machine from the top, you will never be able to actually maintain the complexity of society. And if you can't maintain the complexity of society, then your society will slowly wither. And that's what we see in every attempt at authoritarianism. The more authoritarian something is, the more it has to dominate its subjects. It must be violent. It must threaten them. It must deceive them. And the more it must reduce the overall complexity of the society that it is seeking to command. So yeah, absolutely. Hypnosis says, Remaking Society was good by Bookchin. Yes, absolutely. I like that one too. Flinner says, you've said on Twitter before that you think we're living through another Great Depression. Do you really believe that? I don't think we've gotten there yet, but it's probably coming. I do. I think we've been in it for a while. Maybe I am underestimating how bad the Great Depression was. But if you just look at all of the metrics, we never really recovered from the 2008 financial crisis. Like we recovered in some capacity, but we never really recovered. Our spending power never sprung back. Productivity kept going up, but wages just never returned. All those pensions that got destroyed are destroyed. All the people who lost their houses. We just never really recovered from the 2008 financial crisis, and things are only getting worse and worse. I feel like we're just being plunged deeper and deeper and deeper into the depression. It's lasting longer because they won't admit that it's happening. That's just my perspective. Yeah, you know. Oh, the queer agenda. I'm so glad you said that. I totally forgot. They said, can you mention the share and the link to the fundraiser for the Northumberland 2, please? Absolutely. So let me grab this real quick. Sorry, I'm getting it all pulled up. So I'm reading through this right now because I thought I knew what this case was, but I actually am not familiar with this case. But I will read the statement that was given here. 2 friends have been arrested and are being held on multiple felony and misdemeanor charges. Kara and Celeste are being held on $150,000 bail each. We are fundraising to pay their bail, lawyers, and legal fees, including the cost of their ankle monitors, housing, transportation, and other associated unanticipated costs related to legal repression. Our 2 friends are accused of freeing hundreds of minks from a fur farm in Pennsylvania. This farm kills tens of thousands of minks every season. The Fur Commission USA has launched an aggressive media campaign targeting and doxing our friends. One of our friends is being targeted with transphobic violence in jail. They're being held in solitary confinement, subjected to transphobic threats, and restricted from accessing phone except during limited hours. Kara and Celeste are deeply caring people who frequently volunteer distributing food, clothing, and supplies to their communities. Kara also volunteers for a bike cooperative in Massachusetts, supporting people who need access to transportation and getting free bikes. So these 2 we're calling the Northumberland 2. The link to that, if you'd like to donate for everything listed there, is there in the chat. Go ahead and donate what you can to them. You want to talk about actual animal liberation? You want to talk about like a vegan praxis? That's vegan praxis. That's animal liberation praxis right there. So, yeah, in U2. Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, I thought when you sent that originally, I thought I was familiar. And then I looked at it and I was like, oh, actually, no, I'm not. So glad I took a second to read through that instead of just assuming. F. Fordasoon says, why is it that authoritarianism always goes after queer people? I feel like I know the answer, but I'm interested in your thoughts. Because authoritarianism requires, I keep saying this, reduction of complexity. It wants to establish a norm because that norm is easier to govern, okay? When you have people that are all kinds of different things and they're diverse and they have different ideas and desires and perspectives, that's hard to govern. It's hard to get them to fall in line and to accept your domination. So when people begin breaking out of hierarchical social relations, such as gender paradigms, such as paradigms around ableism, such as paradigms around, the killing of animals and animal liberation and things like that, such as the paradigms around worker subservience to capital, such as paradigms around the citizen subservience to the state. Those things are all a threat to the existing paradigm. Liberals are better at maintaining it, but over time, they will begin to suppress those elements as well, because the elements become more and more threatening to the maintenance of a hierarchical order. And that is just a universal factor in all hierarchical power structures. It doesn't happen immediately, but it always happens eventually. And it's because what they want is normalization of a single paradigm, and they want everybody to fall in line into the paradigm. And that is more example of the reduction of complexity that I noted as being part of authoritarianism over the course of this whole stream. Scotty Too Hottie, do you see my message about it? Let me go check. Scotty Tuhati says, couldn't you argue that improving material conditions and living standards should be equally as important as libertarian autonomy, not less important? To not is first world privilege? No. In fact, I think this is kind of contradictory to the historical perspective. It's not bad to improve like people's life, to give people better wages, to fight for them to have health care. It's not bad. But it's not transformative. And in fact, history shows that if that fight goes far enough, it often actually takes the steam out of revolutionary movements. So all of these social democracies that we see in Sweden and Norway and Denmark and all of that were originally very revolutionary. These were very, very revolutionary movements. And they said, okay, well, we're going to fight for every gain that we can. We're going to do parliamentarianism, and we're going to push. Well, they were so damn successful, they got pretty much everything they wanted, and that stole all the momentum out of their movement. So the impulse to just improve people's materials conditions, and that's it, is really just a social democratic impulse. It's asking for the state and capital to bribe you better, but to stay a slave. It's to stay a slave, but to get better rations, to get a better shack, to be whipped less. That's what it is. And so I understand that it's more persuasive to tell people we're fighting for this particular thing than to fight for it and then to get it. In fact, that invigorates people. It can build a mass movement if you do it right. But if that's all your program really boils down to, you'll just turn into a social democrat. You'll just become an opportunist. That's what'll happen. You'll become an opportunist. You'll appeal to the lowest common denominator. You'll lose your left revolutionary values. You'll stop engaging in a social revolution, and you'll begin engaging in reformism. And that's just what history shows. So I think that there was a time when perhaps that would have seemed like a callous thing to say, but I just invite you to go read history, because that's what all of history shows. That's what history shows. So, I think that actually the construction of an alternative power structure is the most imperative. It's in first place, second place, third place, fourth place, fifth place, and sixth place, and maybe down in like seventh place is that, because you will never have actual control over your material conditions until you develop power along with the people. Okay, you will always be asking for handouts for the rest of your life if you let hierarchical power structures persist. If you let the state continue, if you let capital still control the economy, then you'll get your handouts for a generation, maybe two, but then your movement will peter out. And how will you convince them after you have no movement to keep giving you the handouts? Then you're right back where you started. Like in Switzerland today and in Sweden today, they're all backsliding into fascism. Fascist parties are winning huge numbers in their parliaments. These are places that did precisely what we just said. They fought hard for improvement in their material conditions. And it only took a few generations, and they're already back to fascist incursion. And so I'm not saying that it was bad that they got those concessions. But I need you to understand that that is not revolutionary, and that is not priority number one. Priority number one is building power for the people. And then that power is what allows you to get anything you want. You can have reform if you want it, but if you have enough power, you don't have to stop with reform. You can have a revolution. You can now be the counterpower that takes regional hegemony. You don't need to beg anymore. Begging means you will always stay perpetually begging. You need to build something that is fearsome and that itself can replace the state and capital. That's the revolutionary perspective. All right. Sorry. Scotty Too Hottie says there's nothing that an anarchist society can do for the people that an ML state also can't do for the people. There absolutely is. I mean, an ML state can't empower the people. It literally can't do all the things that an anarchist society can do. It can't empower the people. It can't give them control over their lives. It cannot give them permanent assurances that the conditions will improve. It cannot free them from slavery. It cannot free them from the rule of capital. It cannot free them from the state. It cannot free them from white supremacy. It cannot free them from imperialism. It cannot free them from anything, really. It's just a new social democracy. It's state capitalism most of the time through big nationalization campaigns. And then over time, the natural internal imperatives of the state just make it move towards liberalization of the economy and therefore movement back to traditional capitalism. So, its internal imperatives are towards capitulation to hierarchical power. So it literally can't do anything that an anarchist state does, because everything that it might give people is just a handout, just giving the table scraps to the masses from the table of those who control the economy. Scotty Too Hottie, if you want to learn what I mean, you should go watch A Modern Anarchism. Parts 1 through 4 are answering your question. So that it's an entire video series being published into a book to be released later this year in the winter. So I expound on what that means in extensive depth using complex systems analysis and chaos theory and theory from anarchists and elsewhere in order to expand on what power is, what power structures are, what the difference between hierarchical and horizontal power structures are, and why that is meaningful as well. So, as well as how you carry out revolution and how revolution moves towards the process of empowering the people. So if you'd like to learn, go watch the series or read it. It's also up on Anarchist Library. Imkra says, how do you think horizontal structures could handle a radiological emergency like what happened in Guyana in 87? There's a pretty good Brazilian Netflix series showing the events now. I actually am just not familiar with that at all. I'll just cop to that. Not familiar, but I'll try to look into that. Yeah, let's see here. Scotty Too Hottie, you should be careful about throwing around the accusation that people are using abstractions when you haven't even done requisite study of the subject. You probably need to do some basic study before you start levying accusations. Because right now you don't even know what I mean by things that are very basic in the things that I've written. And that suggests you should probably practice humility rather than being an asshole. Davey Rules says, I feel like MLs forget that they're supposed to actually work towards communism. They just become so obsessed with defending the so-called worker state. That is precisely correct. Yeah, they lose complete view of the fact that they were supposed to do a revolution, and they were supposed to transform conditions. They get completely bogged down in the maintenance of this enormous Goliath that they have constructed, even as it is falling apart. The social body is dissolving, and they can't keep everything together, and all they can do is keep exacting more and more extreme forms of violence, precisely because they ignored Gall's law, as we just said. Timmy Wallace asked, any websites or links connected to the New York event you're going to? Yes. Woodbine, Dual Power Gathering. I'll get it pulled up real quick. Yeah, here we go. Here you go. So I will be going to this called Life Houses, Resilience Hubs, and Dual Power, a space for practitioners. So yeah, there it is. That's what I'll be attending. They're going to be flying me out. Looking forward to it. 0x ACAB says your work leans on Mumford a bit. Any thoughts on Marshall McLuhan? Not familiar. I've heard the name, but I don't know enough about them to make any educated statements. Scotty Too Hottie. Oh, wow. We've been blessed. That is a brain dead take. Defending the worker state is a prerequisite to achieving communism. My friend, there is no such thing as a worker state. That doesn't exist. Worker states don't exist. There's never been a worker state. There never will be a worker state. It being a state means that it cannot be controlled by the workers. If it were controlled by the workers, it would cease to be a state. It is definitionally impossible for a state to be controlled by the workers. The state is that body that alienates the people from control over the civil functions of society. Got another donation from Melkor for $20. They said, love your stream. And I appreciate it. People have been saying this is a good one. I've noticed a few comments. NLH commentary said, Anark, do you think anarchists should try to infiltrate academia, or is it a hierarchical dead end and a violation of means ends unity? No, I think that's one of the only ways you can really do academia is to go into academia. I think that if you want to do academics, go into academia, be an anarchist in academia. Now there's probably going to be problems with the violation of means ends unity, but then again, so is being in any workplace, right? Like being in any workplace is you having to live in the world you were given. You don't get to choose the world. You just have to live in it. So as long as you're not like becoming provost or something, like I think that, being an academic, being a graduate student, being a doctoral advisor, like all that stuff seems completely reasonable, and teach students about anarchism at an academic level so that people can actually learn about anarchism at that level of detail, rather than their only encounter with anarchism just being this vulgar lifestyleism and street politics, aimless street politics. Yeah, I think that people need to get a deeper and more systemic understanding of anarchism. Yeah, as Fortescue says, how are the workers the boss when there are bosses controlling the workers? Exactly. It's all just rhetoric. In state capitalism, the workers are never the boss. The workers are being bossed around. The bosses are just now the state. So just administrators by the state boss the workers around instead of administrators by the capitalists. And for some reason now the workers are meant to just be okay with it. The people are not much happier when when the stick they're being beaten with is called the people's stick. Just paraphrasing, but yeah. Socialist Sociopath says, what kind of music do you listen to? Any favorite albums or artists? I listen to so much different kinds of music. It is so hard for me. Every time I'm asked this question, I just say what I'm currently listening to. Currently, I've been listening to a lot of Japanese city pop from like the 70s through the 90s. Loving it. So good. Wonderful. But I listen to all kinds of stuff. Gloked Beard says, just finished Machiavelli's The Prince. Quite the read that is often misinterpreted. Have you read it? And do you think that there are lessons from Machiavelli that should be utilized by anarchists? Yeah, no, I did read it back a long time ago, though. I was doing my associates back when I read it. But no, I remember it basically being like an instruction manual about how to rule, but it also had elements of kind of like satire or maybe a kind of a tongue-in-cheek criticism, an undertone of tongue-in-cheek criticism. Yet at the same time, it remained a strong descriptor of how hierarchical power works. And I also remember it just containing some things that were just the logic of power, not just hierarchical power, but also just power more generally. And so yeah, no, I should probably reread it now. I've read so much in between when I read that in my associates. I probably would have a very different perspective on it now if I read it. Zuko says, maybe it's useful to devise literally a multi-generational path to achieve the socialist goal. That is precisely what I have done in part 3 of A Modern Anarchism. So you should go watch A Modern Anarchism and then just watch it all the way through, but just know that in part 3, that is precisely what you will be given. You will be given, in fact, a revolutionary flowchart that takes you from your material conditions to the end goal of global revolution. So if that's what you're looking for, there you go. Oh, am I still on stream? Yeah, I'm still on stream. That was weird. My window just crashed. Okay, that's weird. Yeah, no, I'm good. We're good. Stream's still on. That was very odd. CC Femboy says, Daniel back when he was a Marxist. Just to be clear, I was never just like explicitly, I mean, maybe I would have self-described as a Marxist, but I was never like just strictly a Marxist. I was always kind of getting things from anarchism as well. Blumenhan says, do you have any recommendations for anarchist novels? No, I wish I'd realized that I misread your question when I first read it, but no, I can't think of any. I mean, I know a lot of people like Ursula Le Guin, for example. Ian McKay, people have told me, has a very anarchist bent to it. Yeah. But I haven't read a huge amount of fiction that I would say is very anarchist. Timmy Wallace says, Anark, you're such an inspiration. You've given me and so many others reason to keep moving forward. Good luck in New York. I appreciate it. I'm glad to hear that. Melkor, Lord of the Rings is anarcho-monarchist. Okay, that's like legit true though. I mean, that's just accurate. Like, as silly as it sounds, it's so real. It's so real. I want to analyze the politics of Lord of the Rings, and I'd be down to maybe do some media analysis about that, because I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan and I would really be interested in doing some media analysis. Oh, somebody said stuff by Cory Doctorow. Yeah, that's a good call on that. What the hell even is anarcho-monarchism? Kind of incoherent. We could explain it at length. And it's funny because like this is like the 4th live stream where somebody has brought up Tolkien being an anarcho-monarchist. So I don't think I'm going to repeat the whole spiel here, but it is kind of funny. It is an oxymoron. He just had a very peculiar view. I think he had a kind of intuitive anarchism, but he was still set in his ways of living in a monarchist society. So yeah. What do I think of Andrewism? I still love Andrewism's channel. I think he's a great guy, and I'm super happy to see his channel blow up so big. There've definitely been some videos where I've had some disagreements, but he's still a great resource, and he's definitely radicalizing lots of people every day. Socialist Sociopath says, how does one prefigure if anarchist or leftist orgs are literally illegal in their country? Do you know of any activists with experience or tips of your own? I recommend just not calling yourself anarchist. You'll be blown away how far that goes. Don't call yourself anarchist. Don't call yourself leftist. Don't call yourself socialist. Don't call yourself communist. Say you're a horizontalist. Say you want to empower the people. Just don't use any loaded language like that. Do prefigurative praxis and just skip all that language. You will be blown away how effective it is. It is incredibly effective. That's what we do here with Cooperation Tulsa. Fortitude says Tolkien was a brilliant man who was unfortunately British. Accurate. Yes, that is incredibly accurate. Flinner says, do sundown towns still exist in Oklahoma? Not in the formal sense that they once did. There's probably a few where maybe practically they are, where maybe it wouldn't be a good idea for you to like be a black person in those towns, in those cities, but definitely not like in history. And certainly not any large scale cities, or, you know, these would be very small places. And even then, I don't suspect that anything would really happen. So, yeah. Zolthar says, do you have any good English sources on Sika Sosola? Unfortunately, the only sources I found are the ones that you can see in the description to the video I did on it. Daimon says, the Zapatista EZLN experience is anarchism. No, it's not explicitly anarchism, but it's in line with what anarchists advocate. It's like, it's libertarian socialism. And anarchists aren't like super selective about like, oh, you have to call yourself an anarchist, you have to fly an anarchist flag. Like, we don't care. Like, if the revolution doesn't call itself anarchist, that's fine. Don't care. I'll speak for myself, but I think 99% of other anarchists, I don't give a shit if it calls itself anarchist. If it just at least regards the critiques of anarchism, whether consciously or unconsciously, and it utilizes the methods and perspectives of anarchism, whether it even regards those in a deliberate manner or whether they arrive upon them intuitively, we don't care. What we want is revolution. What we want is the empowerment of the masses. We want the elimination of alienation from the economy and the state and all other things. We want dignity and freedom for the people. If you want to learn more about that, go watch my video series on modern anarchism or go read it on Anarchist Library. But I can tell that my camera is getting low on battery and I don't really want to switch out the battery one more time. We're also coming around to the end of the stream. Just want to remind you, if you want to support me, please go over to my Patreon, become a patron for any amount. Remember, if you do so right now, you get to see my next video, which is a radical primer a week early. Will be released on May 1st. However, you get to see it today because I just uploaded it to Patreon, and you get to see what I think will probably be a really good primer. I'm going to turn it into a zine and everything with art inside of it. You can also go get the script. And if you're interested in helping me turn it into a zine, please reach out to me. Oh, there we go. That's the end of the stream, y'all. I'll see y'all later.